All right, here we go. Drive time. Thursday afternoon, 11 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is clear, it is sunny, but it is chilly because, as we go over at the start of every single show, it's December. And once we get later in the calendar, it gets colder. That's how it works, kids. It's about 38 degrees, but the sun is shining here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson producing the show behind the glass today. We got a jam-packed Thursday show for you guys. A really, really good 24 hours for Utah football. We'll go over the recruiting class. It was signing day yesterday, and we're still awaiting some signatures on the dotted line that could actually change the scope of where Utah's recruiting class is. It was a good day for Utah. It was a good day for BYU, good day for both of our in-state programs. Utah State grabbed a couple of quarterbacks and a couple of offensive linemen to boot with their recruiting class. So we'll get into it on the program today. A lot of noise and headlines, quite frankly, grabbed by BYU as of late on a number of different levels, namely, beating Utah 3 straight times. The noise around Kalani Sitake, of course, potentially taking the Penn State job has dominated the headlines over the past little bit. And, of course, BYU has long been thought to have one of the best recruiting classes in the Big 12. So that's not really new news, with the Ryder Lyons kid, the Brock Harris kid, and some others that they were able to grab. But Utah with the last-second push that if you're a Utah football fan, I think you should feel really good today. We're going to get into it on the show. If you missed Ben Moa, Celeste Moa's father and Ute football legend, on with Sean earlier, I would really encourage you to go grab that interview, ESPN700sports.com. You can get it on Sean's podcast page as well. Of course, Ben was a hell of a player in his own right. He's got 3 boys playing college football. So it was a really insightful interview. Some good stuff from our buddy Sean O'Connell today during the midday. So definitely go check that out. So we'll get into the latest college football storylines. Conference championship weekend is ahead, including BYU, Texas Tech. It certainly looks like BYU is going to have to win to get in. I don't know that I agree with that. Certainly when you juxtapose Brigham Young's resume with Notre Dame's, I think if you're a BYU fan, you have a legitimate beef. But I'm not on the committee. I'm just a guy that yaps for 4 hours in the afternoon here in Salt Lake City. I had nothing to say about it. So we'll kind of preview some of the college football championship games coming up this weekend. We'll lean into the Big 12. Latest on Utah's bowl projections, it does look like it's going to be the Vegas Bowl, but nothing official in that direction as of yet. Maybe Iowa. Speaking of Iowa, Kirk Ferentz is coming back for his 28th season. Speaking of which, we have heard nothing official on Coach Witt, just rumors as of now. You have to wonder if this really exciting recruiting class that signed on the dotted line, in addition to a bunch of really good players coming back next year, would motivate Witt one way or the other. Not really sure. So we'll get into it. College football championship weekend starts on Friday with some games with a lot of intrigue. It's Troy, James Madison for the Sun Belt. And depending on what happens with the ACC, if Duke is able to get it done, we could see James Madison in. We could see Tulane in. They're going to take on North Texas for the American Championship on Friday night at 6 o'clock, and then we move over to the Saturday action with 3 really good games. At least we're hoping they're good games. BYU, Texas Tech, Georgia, Alabama, Indiana, Ohio State. Not sure why they're putting the ACC championship game on ABC. Probably contractual, but it's Duke, Virginia. It feels like it should be the lacrosse national championship, not the football ACC championship, but here we are. So the latest in the world of college football. It's a busy, busy day. Your weekend ahead in the NFL starts tonight with a kind of a sneaky big game on Amazon Prime at Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan. It's the Cowboys and the Lions. Cowboys have been able to hang in there. They're 6-5-1. They're still in the mix for a playoff spot. The Lions are 7-5. They're 4-2 at home. Both these two teams need this game badly tonight. So we'll get into the NFL stuff as well. Get you ready for a busy weekend ahead in the world of pro football. The Utah Jazz are back east for a couple of games before they return home. Jazz are going to take on Brooklyn tonight. They're doing the New York two-step. It's Brooklyn tonight, then it's the New York Knicks tomorrow. Utah women in action tonight. You can hear that game on our radio station with coverage starting at 6:15. So right after we say goodnight, we'll send you over to that. The Utah Mammoth have the night off last night, but a good win for them last night Night off tonight. They're back in action against Vancouver tomorrow. They smoked Anaheim 7-0. And there's a lot of noise around Coach Turney as to whether or not this team needs a change at the top. They've underperformed, I think it's safe to say, at least so far. So a lot to do on the program today. Lionel Messi with an interview with ESPN implying that he might not play in the World Cup next year. Why is that pertinent to you, the local sports fan? Well, a couple of weeks before the World Cup starts, Inter Miami is in Salt Lake City to take on Real Salt Lake. And Lionel Messi is hopefully going to be a part of that match because they're selling a lot of tickets at a very high price. So I'm not sure ultimately what that decision could mean for whether or not he'd be available. But I found that rather interesting, and that news came down earlier today. What's the latest with Penn State? Who are they going to hire after Kalani Sitake said no? Apparently they reached out to Kalen DeBoer, and he said, nah, I'm good because, I coach Alabama. Not sure who they're going to land on, but they're down to like their 8th or 9th choice. So the latest in the coaching carousel in the world of college football. We'll start things off with one of our buddies from the Pac-12 Network. It's Roxy Bernstein with our friends at ESPN now. Does a little bit of everything. Does some baseball, does some hockey, does some college football. Very versatile radio personality, TV personality, and one of our favorite guests. We'll bring him in today as our first guest right out of the gate, Sam Bruckhouse, to talk some pro and college football. Bring in Sam today. I always enjoy our conversations with Sam from Sumer Sports. Our guy Richard Smith is live in studio. Bounce around a little bit with Smitty, do a little bit of everything. And then our friends from Handy and Handy for a little sports court on a Thursday, as we are often want to do. So Roxy Bernstein, Sam Bruckhouse, Richard Smith, our friends from Handy and Handy, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. And that guy, a football guy at heart,
what up?
Give him a steak rare and his whiskey neat and his coffee black and his football right into the veins. Porter Larson, how are you, young man?
Few corrections.
Oh, okay.
Coffee?
Uh-huh.
More of like a vanilla iced latte guy.
Little latte. I like a good sugar-free vanilla latte myself.
No whiskey at the moment.
No whiskey at the moment. Proud of you. Shout out Andrew Huberman.
That's more of a couldn't handle it. So,
Hey, if you cannot moderate, you must eliminate.
Exactly.
Write that down.
Otherwise, though, yes. Rare steaks, a lot of football. I'm your guy. Also, hey, National Finals Rodeo starts tonight. Just throwing that out there.
Hold on, but the opening tip is right around the corner, dog.
I just was making sure you got to that.
Do you know anybody competing?
There's a lot of Utahns.
Okay.
None of my connections there did.
Okay.
The Field fella, Camus's own Field family, he's retired. So we're watching the right boys that you're familiar with.
Oh, obviously. Hey, give me a quick hot take on what the last 24 hours means for Utah football. I think if you're a Utah football fan, you should feel really, really good about what just transpired.
If you're a Utah football fan, you should feel really good. Obviously, Moa and his kids sticking home, a big one for Utah, but also, you got the number one player in Utah, the number one player in Idaho, number one player in New Mexico, some of the top players in the other surrounding states. You're really kind of showing that despite BYU and the recruiting class that they have coming in and the foothold they're making in the West of their own, it's not just around the mountain. Utah is doing it as well, regardless of what the NIL situation looks like. If you're getting those guys to sign on the dotted line, something's going right. And for Utah, from what I'm hearing, that's a big part of the reason they had a big day yesterday. So we'll see how they were able to pull that off as time goes on. And if you're a Utah fan, you're excited. If you're Kyle Whittingham, I don't know how much you want to walk away from that roster, especially with some guys coming in that should be day one starters.
Yeah, tough to say. Tomorrow is the deadline. But as we've been talking about all week, and CK, Chris Camerani, hopped on yesterday, just because Kyle needs to tell the administration doesn't mean the administration is going to tell us. So we may not know for quite some time, barring somebody, being able to break that news. Good luck with that, as all I'll say. All right, Roxy Bernstein, our first guest on this Thursday afternoon. But before Roxy stops by, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
It's the holiday season, kids. It's the best time of year for sports. We've got bowl games, basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while you and I are out here making decisions every day, what gifts to buy, what to eat, which game to watch, there's one place where it feels good to be right, and that is with Prize Picks. New feature alert, guys. Listen up. Prize Picks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. It's fantasy football playoffs. Are you out? Are you eliminated? Well, my team's cooked, but with Prize Picks, I don't have to wait until next year's draft. Prize Picks lets you play fantasy football every week. You can pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections. No draft required. Step number one is go get the free money. You should always do that. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right, talked about this with Sean during Crosstalk today, and I will reiterate, if you did not hear Sean's interview with Ben Moa, I would encourage you to run to our website when we're at break, because you should listen to this show. But when we're at break, go to ESPN700sports.com. And Sean had a chance to catch up with Ben Moa, of course, Utah football legend, who, by the way, just dabbled in bare-knuckle boxing, as one does in his 30s. Just quick
or
hot
40s.
Take. Quick hot take.
Not too late.
Quick hot take. I do not want to be punched in the face by Ben Moa. I'm just going to let me get that out there.
You're not in his weight class, but
yeah, no. Well, regardless if
you
I
can
was
still
in his weight
bare-knuckle
class,
box if you want.
I do not want to do that with Ben Moa. But some big news came down yesterday. Some unexpected news came down yesterday as Celeste Moa, Ben's son, flipped his commitment from Tennessee to Utah. So this is a big deal on a number of different reasons. First of all, he's awesome. Okay, so there's that. He has the potential to play on both sides of the ball. Ben really outlined how this all went down on Sean's show earlier. And ultimately, a couple of takeaways. According to Ben, it was Lewis Powell who reached out at the last minute to see if there was any opportunity to change Celeste's mind. So a big shout out to Lewis Powell today. Of course, there's a lot of attention all the time on Kyle, on Morgan. Of course, Jason as the play caller. But this is something that Lewis Powell deserves, as the kids would say, his flowers for, just for kicking the tires, because it's been out there for a number of months that Celeste was going to Tennessee. That's not new news. What's new is he flipped on literally the 24th hour to come to the University of Utah. And according to Ben, he just really wanted to stay home, continue the legacy that was started by his father. Now, Ben also has a couple of other sons, Celeste's brothers, who started their college career at BYU, and both have transferred since then. But according to Ben, and look, as somebody who has 3 younger brothers, 4 brothers in the family, to be able to admit that they're better than you are at something, that takes a lot, especially if you're a competitive football player like the Moa brothers are. And according to Ben, Celeste's the best of the bunch. But the main takeaway, okay, is this. Over the past, calendar year, maybe even a little bit more, and it really started on the basketball side of things. After Mark Pope left BYU for Kentucky, BYU was able to take Kevin Young from the pro ranks and hire him as their head basketball coach. And as the story goes, he's being paid about $5 million, between $4 and $5 million per year. He's one of the highest paid basketball coaches in the Big 12. Then after that, they snagged the Yegor Demon kid, who, of course, is now playing for the Brooklyn Nets last year. So the storylines actually maybe started a couple of years ago about the potential of BYU athletics really separating themselves from a lot of different programs, not the least of which is the University of Utah, as a result of their deep pockets. And we know the deal. Cookie money, etc. Shout out to our cookie bro who's having a big week. He's really feeling himself this week. So there you go. BYU has a bunch of different alums that have started businesses, that have started MLMs, that have started pyramid schemes, that ultimately have allowed them to make a lot of money, and they care about BYU football and BYU basketball. So they're very front-facing. They really like the attention. They want to send out the tweets. They want to get off the sideline. Let's send out the cookie signal so our guy gets off the sideline. It's like an Avengers feel where they want to be front-facing and send out videos of them bragging about paying a fine that, by the way, was never even levied. So Cookie Bro's like, hey, I'm going to pay the fine. And Big 12 is like, all right, well, we're not fining BYU. So anyway, but BYU's donors and boosters have been very front-facing and want the attention. Okay, on the other side of things, you don't hear much about who Utah's donors are and who their boosters are. Now, it's not hard to draw the conclusion. The names are on the buildings, right? But the main takeaway, at least I had, from Sean's interview with Ben Moa is when Sean asked Ben about Utah's potential to compete in the NIL space, and I'm paraphrasing here, Ben essentially said they can compete with anybody in the country. Now, why does that hold merit coming from Ben Moa? Well, here's why. Celeste just flipped his commitment from Tennessee to Utah. The Nico Iamaleava kid, who's currently UCLA's quarterback, was reportedly offered and paid, close to $3 or $4 million. UCLA was able to poach him, but he also went back home. Tennessee is a legitimate SEC program with deep pockets. So, yes, I'm sure Celeste wanted to stay home. I would imagine whether it was Jason or Morgan. Again, shout out to Lewis Powell for making the phone call. Or whoever it was, could have been Whit. You never know. Sitting down and outlining the plan for Celeste that apparently sounds like he will start on the offensive side of the ball. And then according to Ben, once he's kind of mastered his craft there, they could move him over to safety. Morgan and Whit have earned the benefit of the doubt for identifying players that made their way through high school, playing a certain position, and then changing their position when they came to the U. And a lot of those players ended up being millionaires playing pro football. Our guy, Nate Orchard, being one of them. He was an insanely good wide receiver at Highland High. And Whit saw him and was like, dude, you're a defensive end now. And Nate's like, all right. Morgan himself was a Heisman Trophy, the high school equivalent of the Heisman Trophy winner in Utah, as a dominant running back at Highland, and then played safety at the U. The Kruger brothers, we could go over the list of names and talk about several different players that were identified as, a different position than how they made their way to college. So it sounds like Celeste's going to start on offense. And by the way, it's exactly what Utah needs, a playmaker on the outside. Sean was saying he reminds him a lot of Puka Nacua. He's built very similar to Puka Nacua. I think a lot of the hard-hitting Polynesian kids have been safeties, defensive backs, linebackers, defensive linemen. And look, obviously the coaching staff knows way better than I do, but when it comes to the ability to make plays on the outside, if Celeste is what you've been looking for, maybe you keep him there. If he's like this Puka Nacua hybrid, go ahead and keep him there. But if you're a Utah football fan, here's the bottom line, okay? BYU has dominated the headlines because they love the attention. Their donors love the attention. Whether it's, their football boosters, their basketball boosters, they want to be sitting on the front row in their joggers and their Jordans, and they want you to know they're there. Okay. When they donate, they send out social media videos because they want to be part of the crew. And a lot of these rich boosters are guys that could never even walk straight or play football or basketball, but they want to be in a locker room. They want to be cool. They want to be around athletes. They want, there's a little jock sniffer stuff going on. And they want you to know what they're doing. Hence the thirst traps, as the kids would say. The videos, okay, we're paying the fine. I'm coming off the sideline. Here we go. Look at me. And all of the headlines have been kind of dominated by BYU because of their NIL initiatives, because of, paying Yegor Demon and get him to BYU. And then, of course, the big news, getting the best recruit in the country, A.J. DeBonson, paying him essentially $5 million for 4 months of basketball, paying their college basketball coach among the highest paid coaches in the Big 12. Kalani is now the second highest paid coach in the Big 12 to Deion Sanders, according to reports. And what Utah just did behind the scenes is really steal a lot of the thunder kind of quietly. Now, I'm not taking anything away from BYU. As I said earlier, we have long known that they were going to have one of the best recruiting classes in the Big 12 because of the Ryder Lyons kid, who's a 4-star quarterback who looks to be really good. He's going to go on a mission. I guess when you're a good athlete, you only have to serve a year now, so that's a new thing. But he'll come back and potentially redshirt during Bear Bachmeier's junior year. So they're going to go straight from Bear Bachmeier to Ryder Lyons and essentially have their quarterback spot dialed in until like 2030. The Brock Harris kid, he's a 4-star player. They signed a lot of really good players. BYU has the third best recruiting class, according to Rivals, in the Big 12. But after Celeste's flip, Utah went from 42 to 36 in the entire country, and now they sit at 5th in the Big 12. They bump up a spot. And the only two teams in the Big 12 that signed 2 top 50 kids are Texas Tech and Utah. So as of now, the rankings, according to Rivals, and there's 247, there's ESPN, there's a bunch of services that do this. Texas Tech is 1. West Virginia is 2. Shout out Mountaineers. They need a little boost. BYU is 3. Arizona State 4. Utah's at 5. A very solid 24 hours for Utah football. I think answering a lot of questions. And again, bottom line is this. Ben Moa himself told Sean earlier that when it comes to NIL initiatives, Utah can compete with anyone in the country. And the reason that holds merit is his son just flipped from Tennessee to Utah, okay? And yes, the staying home angle is great. The plan that was laid out is awesome. But let's make no mistake, Celeste's not flipping unless Utah could be competitive in NIL with a school like Tennessee. And it sounds like they were. That's excellent news. We'll catch a break. We're going to bring in Roxy Bernstein coming up on the other side. We got Sam Bruckhouse, Richard Smith. We got a busy Thursday show, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. It's time to invoke potentially my favorite saying. One of the coolest opportunities I ever had was like having a front row seat to watch Pat Riley coach the Knicks. And he said several different things that were very wise, but it's time to invoke potentially the wisest Pat Riley saying of all time, as I have to do the show standing up. Back problems will change your personality.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the most spot-on Pat Rileyism I ever heard.
Can confirm.
Dude, structurally, I'm struggling. Our next guest doesn't give a rip, though, so let's get to it. Roxy Bernstein, hello, sir. How are you?
Spence, I'm good, brother. How you doing?
How's your back, man? I think I'm old. Oh, wait. I won't ask how old you are. We're close to the same age. How's the body holding up as you age?
Unfortunately, it's starting to break down, man. Father Time is undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get older, you got little bumps and bruises and sore and uncomfortable feeling in certain areas as you're getting older. I've had some back issues. Nothing major, but at some point I'm probably going to need a new hip. I've come to that conclusion. So, it beats the alternative, though, right?
What's that, just death?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Porter does remind me, don't you play rec hockey a couple times a week?
I do play beer league hockey, yeah.
Jeez,
I skated yesterday, actually, in fact.
That a guy. Are you allowed to hit each other?
We don't hit each other. You bump into each other. Stuff happens. You're battling along the boards, and, you can get physical, but it's not like I'm not lining somebody up at the blue line and dropping a shoulder, right in their midsection. We're not doing that, or I'm not hip checking somebody trying to go by me along the wall. But, occasionally it happens. You run into people. Hockey is a physical sport. I'm sure everybody there is figuring that out.
I want to see a video of you dropping the gloves, man. That's all I want.
Those days are long gone, Spence.
Okay.
There is video. I'm guessing. These Live Barn is an app that streams a lot of the rinks around the country, and I have dropped the gloves on occasion back in the day, but that's way behind me now.
Fair enough. And all we'll do now is talk about the sports into the microphones, which is fine. And while we're in the hockey space, Roxy, the Mammoth smoked Anaheim last night. It was an ass-kicking. But overall, it appears like there might be a little noise around Coach Torney with all of the expectations that this team had. And then the hot start kind of set this precedent in all of our minds, like, oh, yes, they really are that good. Now, it's a long year. It's not even mid-December. But what do you make of the up-and-down nature of the Mammoth, and is it fair to say that they may have underperformed as of now?
In recent weeks, potentially. They've hit a rut, right? Now, they responded with a much-needed performance last night against Anaheim. I was actually at their game, Spence, on Monday in San Jose, and they did not play well, especially defensively. Now, the Sharks have a lot of speed, like Utah does. I think the teams are similarly built in that regard. The one thing I will say that I think Utah needs to get a little more size, especially up front. Now, their top six are extremely skilled when you look at Keller and Gunther and what those guys can do and Cooley. But I think they need a little size. And at some point, we'll see what Bill Armstrong and Chris Armstrong decide to do if they look to add. And there's certainly a lot of firepower coming in the system and prospects that the team is loaded with. But I think that they lack a little size up front, and that's something that I think they will look at moving forward.
I agree. And, Spicy Tuna, our guy Liam O'Brien, is like their enforcer. But look, I know Ty Domi was like 5'8", 5'9", but he's not very big. I just feel like, to your point, the skill is there, and oftentimes on the attack, they're really exciting to watch. Their penalty kills have been better this year, but I just feel like when I watch them, more often than not, they're just out-physicaled, which may not be a term, but that's kind of where I've landed.
Well, and it's not necessarily just, dropping the gloves and looking to fight, or it's the physicality when you're talking about also battling for pucks, right? Puck battles, winning those, getting strong presence inside and holding your position as you're trying to box out around the net. Those are things where the strength comes in and the size comes into play. Look, Clayton Keller is gifted, but he's not considered to be a large man out there on the ice. But you can pair him up with somebody maybe that has that size. Now, they do have size that you talked about in the bottom six with guys like Krause and McBain, but it's the top six that has all that skill with the speed and guys like Peterka that can really fly, but they need to add a little jam to it. And physically, at times it can catch up with them, but at times they look phenomenal, like last night where they were flying past Anaheim, who had been playing great, Spence. That's a team that's leading the Pacific Division, and you talk about how good Golden Knights have been, the Kings, but Anaheim right now is on top of that division, and that was a really good win for Utah last night, going on the road and just hammering the Ducks. I don't think a lot of people expected that, considering some of the struggles that the Mammoth have had recently.
One more thing here. I referenced, and look, I don't know how real the noise is. It's just a lot of people who kind of cover the team on a day-to-day basis a little bit more intimately than I do, are questioning whether or not Coach Torney, who everyone calls Bear, is kind of the guy. I'm not fire the coach guy, never really have been. And ultimately, I've been pretty impressed. I've had a chance to interview him a couple of times, and when he has media availability after games, he sounds intelligent, but I think it is fair to say, we're 27, 28 games in now. Do you think he's the right guy for this team?
Look, for me, it's hard to say because I don't see the Mammoth on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But I've been impressed with him in my conversations. Look, I've had Utah a couple times already this season and impressed with him and the way he's able to break the game down. And I know the players really respect him, and he has the power in the room. And that's a big thing when the guys respect the coach and want to play for him. And so he's able to communicate well with the players. They understand their roles. And that's critical this day and age in the NHL, and that's something you need to do. And I think he is very good about that. Look, if they continue to struggle, I think it's a very fair question that, all right, what's going to happen with the coaching situation with the Mammoth? And there's some good coaches available. You look out there, a guy like Pete DeBoer, for example, is floating out there. But at this point, he has the presence in the room. He has the buy-in factor, which is very clear for me. And they're just going through a tough time right now. They got off to that great start. I think you got to give them the credit for that, too. And let's see how they come out of this. This road trip continues before they get home. They'll have a stretch of games at home, which are going to be critical. But I think that he's earned the benefit of the doubt the way this team has played. And right now they're in a playoff position. You got to give them credit for that.
Moving over to some local college football storylines, it has been a pretty wild week here on a number of different levels. And, I never thought Kalani was leaving. I know the Penn State job is an excellent job. I have no idea who they're going to hire now, probably a different topic. But
I'm not a candidate, just in case you were wondering, Spence. I am not a candidate for Penn State.
At this point, keep your cell phone on, man, because apparently even their interim coach is going to take the UConn job, according to a recent report. Who knows? But, what Kalani was able to do is parlay these conversations into a healthy raise for himself and a healthy raise for his assistants. And good for Kalani. He's a friend of the show. When he was the defensive coordinator up here, I did a weekly coaches show with him and very much like him and root for him. And I'm thrilled that it ended with him staying here and getting the raise he deserves. The reports are that he's now the second highest paid coach in the Big 12 to Dion. And BYU has a long-standing tradition of simply refusing to pay their coaches market value. It's a different era, and Kalani is 22-3 in his last 25. They're about to play for a Big 12 championship. By any metric you want to use, he has proven he is an elite recruiter and an elite head coach. But it does end with him staying in Provo and saying no to Penn State. What do you think?
I'm like you. I'm in the camp that I didn't think he was going to leave either, as attractive as Penn State could be. That the connections, the affinity he has for BYU, the people there. And it was evident to me when I was in town this summer and went to a retirement party for Tom Homo down at BYU. And Kalani spoke and was impressive, but just the strong, tight-knit connections that he has. And even though Tom retired, Brian Santiago's doing a great job as the new AD there. And you alluded to paying coaches. They're clearly doing that with Kevin Young as well. But there's a commitment at BYU. They want to win, and they know how important Kalani Sitake is to that football success, and I think Kalani realizes how special that opportunity is to be the head coach at BYU, what it means to him. So it didn't surprise me that he was able to turn it down. Look, even if he had no interest in the job, I'm sure there was some intrigue and that it was attractive to him. But at the end of the day, he's using his leverage, right? He had leverage in terms of being wanted by a high major program and a program that's had a lot of success over the years. And when you come back and BYU understands the value that Kalani Sitake brings to their program as well, is important for them to keep him. He had a little leverage, which made sense for him to use it to get a better deal. He's not the first coach to use it, and he won't be the last either.
That's the name of the game, and Porter made a good point earlier in the week when Kalani was the defensive coordinator up here. The rumors were that Witt was in serious conversation with Tennessee. Kind of the same deal. I never thought Kyle was going to leave, but what Kyle was able to do is kind of parlay those conversations into a comfortable deal for himself and his assistants. And Kalani kind of had a front row seat to that. So ultimately, this is just the deal. It's the name of the game, right? Like, that's how college coaching works.
And you need to take advantage of it because at some point you're not going to have that leverage. And to get the best deal for yourself and maximize your value. And that's what he did. And I don't blame him at all for doing it. And I applaud BYU for fighting for their coach and making his decision a pretty easy one, at least for me, the way I looked at it, that if BYU is going to step up and let him know his worth and pay him what he's worth, that he was going to stay, and they deserve a lot of credit. And he's comfortable there. He understands the landscape. I think he feels he can win at that program. I'm not saying he didn't feel confident going to Penn State, but let's face it, you go to the Big Ten, and it's a lot more challenging to navigate through Ohio State, and Michigan, and USC. And look, the Big 12 is a tough league, as we know, but if you're committed in the Big 12 at BYU, you've got as good a chance as anybody to win that conference and be a threat year in, year out.
So I concur that the Big 12 has quality football. It doesn't really feel like the committee believes that to be the case, though, right? I mean, BYU at this point, Roxy, is the lowest ranked one-loss P4 team at this point in the calendar in the history of the AP poll. And I think they're good. Ultimately, it looks like they're going to have to beat Texas Tech on Saturday to get in. But when you line up their resume, certainly next to Notre Dame's, I think BYU has a legitimate case to make that even if they lose on Saturday, they should be considered as an at-large possibility. But the committee is saying absolutely not. I mean, they would need Bama to lose by like 40, and they would probably have to play a really, really hard-fought close game against Tech, where they're a 12.5-point favorite. Danny Cannell was on the show yesterday, and he basically was like, look, you guys out in Big 12 country need to understand this is the SEC and the Big 10 Invitational. Do you agree with that? And why do you think the committee isn't viewing BYU, at least based off of what they're telling us, as far as a potential at-large possibility if they lose on Saturday?
I think there is some validity to what Danny Cannell said in terms of the power laying with the SEC and the Big 10. And the multiple bids, look, they may get 3 or 4 for each conference of the 12. We'll see how it plays out. And the other school, I look at Miami, for example. Well, they granted it was a home game, but they have a head-to-head win against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is 2 spots ahead of them. And that's another thing I'm trying to wrap my head around. And then you're getting all the push for Texas, which I don't get, that they have 3 losses. And you don't lose to a 4-win team. I'm sorry. But Texas right now should not be part of the equation. Now they're on the outside looking in as of right now, and we'll see how it plays out. And I guarantee you the SEC is going to try to flex their muscle, as will the Big Ten. And we'll see between Ohio State and Indiana what happens. But the Big Ten's got, 3 of the top 5 right now in the poll, right, with Oregon being 5th. Mm-hmm. But then you look at the SEC. They got Georgia in there, Ole Miss, even with Lane Kiffin leaving, they're still getting the respect I think they deserve. A&M, Oklahoma, and then Alabama, where you have 5 of the top 9 or 4 of the top 9, whatever it is from the SEC. Unfortunately, I think if you're the Big 12 or the ACC, you're going to kind of get left out because of so many of those Big 10 and SEC teams' presence in the top 9.
So on the scale of, because I've never been like a Big 12 apologist. I'm not a conference shill. I mean, I'm hoping that at some point Utah gets into the Big 10 because I still believe that if you're not in the SEC or in the Big 10, in a way you are on the outside looking in. So I've never been one to try to make the case that the quality of football in the Big 12, top to bottom, is on par with the Big 10 and the SEC. I believe the best football, more often than not, does exist in those two conferences. And there's plenty of metrics that would back that up. NFL talent, draft picks, most of the head-to-heads, right? I mean, if ASU was able to beat Texas last year, it would have been a big deal, for the Big 12 to make a statement. But on the scale of, Roxy, on one side, the committee has a bias against the Big 12. And on the other side, well, wait a second, the best football is played in the SEC and the Big 10. Where do you fall on that scale?
That's accurate, that the best football is played there. But the issue I have, and you heard, for example, Texas and Chris Del Conte, their AD, talk about it the other day, about these strong out-of-conference games. They're not going to play them anymore. And it serves the SEC and the Big 10 to not play ACC or Big 12 teams because you're only elevating potentially those other leagues. And so they want to kind of limit the opportunities, I believe, for those other conferences. So when you get these out-of-conference matchups, okay, I still don't believe Texas is not going to play Ohio State. But I've seen it. For example, Florida bought their way out of a contract with Cal to play at home and home. I think, unfortunately, a casualty of the system that we have right now is going to put these terrific out-of-section, out-of-conference matchups in jeopardy. And it's unfortunate because that's a way to determine who are the good teams. And if the SEC and the Big 10 are going to shy away from playing Big 12 and ACC teams, that's a big problem. And under the current system, I don't blame them for doing it. But at the same time, I think the game suffers and the fans suffer because they don't have these terrific non-conference matchups.
Yeah, well said. I agree. And I've been screaming for scheduling uniformity in this sport forever. And, the other issue that we're running into is, and, this has been kind of hotly debated, but, if you're going to punish teams for playing hard non-conference games and reward teams for just wins, period, you're going to see Alabama do what they just did and add 2 cupcakes to their non-con. Like, at what point can we just, and I know the SEC is moving to a 9-game conference model. That will improve. And hopefully at some point we will just do away with the whole, I think it's week 12 or 13 when the SEC just gives all of us a double bird. And it's like none of us are playing anybody this week or whatever. But do you have a better solution for this? Because it adds to the conspiracy theories. It adds to the weight one side or the other where you feel like it's unfair. And look, if I'm an AD and the committee's telling me yes, we are simply going to look at your win total as opposed to weighing certain things, then I'm going to add a couple of cakewalks too. I'm not even mad at Bama, their game in the system, but at what point do we just kind of move into a scheduling uniformity across the board, at least in P4?
I think we need it, and I'm with you 100% that each of the Power 4 conferences should play the same amount of conference games. You're going to play 8, you're going to play 9. They should do the same all across the board. And it also make it where you need to play some of these games. I don't know how the committee or college football czar could force schools to do it. And the other thing I would do away with, I know the FCS programs really benefit from some of these power conference games because financially it saves a lot of their budget. I understand it. But I have never been a fan of the FBS teams playing the FCS teams. Mm-hmm. I just haven't been. And look, I'm not trying to knock on schools like Weber State or Southern Utah and these schools that are at the FCS level because there's some really good programs down there. Certainly what North Dakota State's been able to do. And you look at Montana, for example, and Montana State recently. But I've never been a fan of those games. They're not playing at the same level. They're not operating the same. I've always been suggested that they should play a spring game against an FCS team. And that way, all right, you play a real game, and that school could still benefit financially. But there's enough FBS teams, Spence, where you don't need to schedule down. You can play somebody at the FBS level. And, if everybody plays 9 conference games and 3 FBS non-conference games, I think that's the way you should do it. But schedule uniformity is the only way, and pressure from you need a commissioner, and that's the other thing, that college football operates in its own zone, and that has to change as well, because that could have a huge impact on the way the college football playoff is set up.
Before I say you loose, I wanted to kick the tires on a couple Utah football storylines here as a result of you being familiar with the program. Of course, for our listeners that may forget, Roxy's our friend from the Pac-12 network. Rest in peace. Well, I know it's still a conference. You get the deal. Back in the day, that's how we kind of got to know Roxy. It's been a really exciting 24 hours. A signing day doesn't hold the same gravitas as it once did because the transfer portal allows you to add some talent, but it's still a big deal. Utah football signed the best recruit in the state. Ben Moa's kid. Ben was a great player for Utah back in the day. Still waiting on a couple of decisions, but their recruiting class was bumped up a number of spots. Good day for BYU as well. But tomorrow, Roxy, is the deadline for Witt to inform the administration as far as what his future plans are. I'll be clear. I have no idea. If I had to lean, I think he's going to say that this is it. I think he's probably going to say that he's decided to move on. He got emotional after Utah's win over K-State. It was the final home game of the season. And it was interesting, if you watch the clip, the sentence that got him, the sentence that actually sent him into a little bit of an emotion was he was talking about his seniors. And then he said, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, I'm thrilled that they were actually able to get the win. And then the sentence that sent him into emotion, he said, during their final opportunity at Rice-Eccles. And that's what got him. It wasn't talking about an individual player. It was the final time at Rice-Eccles. And the way I read that was, oh, wow, this is his final time at Rice-Eccles. And then he went on to say, hey, I always get emotional when talking about my seniors. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, respectfully, I've been covering this forever. Like, you don't. But after the Kansas win on the road, he actually admitted for the first time that he was going to retire last year. But we all know what happened last year. Health gets in the way. It was an absolute disaster. It was hopefully an outlier for the standard this program has put into place. So I'm kind of operating off the assumption that this is it. Maybe he surprises all of us because they have a lot coming back. But your thoughts on the potential of Witt walking out the door, and then attending to the question, what you've been able to ascertain and learn about Morgan, as it looks like Morgan Scalley will just slide over a seat and take over the head job.
He's earned the right to go out whenever he wants to go out.
For sure.
And the way he's built that program and the identity he's created, the culture within that program. Because these days, Spence, let's face it, more so maybe in college basketball than football, you're building teams. You're not building a program. But he built a program and still continues to run a program, which is very different than a lot of the other schools right now because so many guys are coming in and out. It's hard year in, year out to keep and sustain a program, but he's been able to do it even in these challenging and different times that we're seeing. Like you look at, for example, now it's new coach Alex Jensen taking over with hoops, but he's building a team, right? He's got, one player back from last year's team that was a contributor in Keanu Dawes, and he's got, 12, 13 new guys. That's the way a lot of these, especially in basketball, things are going. Football, some schools, for example, like USC, brings guys in and out. And when Deion Sanders took over at Colorado, he ran just about everybody off. But he's been able to keep the format in terms of building a program, which is pretty impressive in this day and age. And people want to be a part, and they buy into what he does. And look, if this is it, and who knows if it is, and everybody's trying to read the tea leaves to see if that's the case right now with Witt, what an impressive, incredible run it has been, the transition he has taken his program to from what was, a mid-major / non-power conference when he was in the Mountain West, transitioning to the Pac-12, the success that he had in that league, and now to the Big 12. It really is remarkable what he's been able to do, especially in this day and age.
Absolute legend. As an alum, somebody went there in the 90s when we were at basketball school. I oftentimes find myself shaking my head when I walk past that stadium to see what he's done, man. It's very, very cool. All right, my friend. Thanks so much for the time. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Happy holiday season. We'll chat soon. Travel safe, okay?
You got it, Spence. Look forward to it. Take care.
Our buddy Roxy Bernstein, old school Pac-12 network guy with ESPN, does a bunch of different stuff, baseball, hockey, football, basketball. He is on social. At Roxy Bernstein is where you find him. I'm sorry to do this to you, Roxy, but you're brought to us today by Evanescence. Evanescence is taking over the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater because, of course, they are. It's in July, so you don't have to really run to get tickets, but we're giving away tickets. Sean is specifically. Listen to Sean O'Connell. Well, listen to the entire show. He's doing a great job. But 1:30 every day, you'll have a chance to win Evanescence tickets. Can you name one Evanescence song?
Not that you're putting me on the spot.
I think there's one really popular one.
Yeah, and I'm blanking on it right now.
Let's play it coming up next for our guy, Sam.
Deal.
Nope, let's not do that. All right, we'll catch a break. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. More football with Sam Brockhouse. Smitty's going to be live in studio. We're going to do Sports Score today as we do every Thursday. Busy show. Keep it here. ESPN 700. Kalen DeBoer addressing the media right now. He's the latest coach to tell Penn State no. Apparently, I mean, he's the coach at Alabama. So, he's got a pretty good gig. All right, let's talk more football, though. Sam Bruckhouse, Sumer Sports. Always fun to catch up with Sam. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are y'all?
I'm well, man. Appreciate the time. So, it's been a busy week out this way. I just referenced, in preparation for the SEC championship game, the coaches are doing their media rounds, and apparently Penn State reached out to Kalen DeBoer. He's like, yeah, I don't know if you know, but I coach Alabama, so I'm good. But they apparently, Sam, were very close to hiring Kalani Sitake, who ultimately was able to parlay those conversations into a brand new extension for himself and hefty raises for his assistants and NIL guarantees as well. Just from an outsider's perspective, help us understand just what type of job Penn State actually is and what it means for BYU to hold on to their head coach.
So when it comes down to it, it's really interesting what the Penn State job has been historically, which obviously was held by Joe Paterno for decades, then moves on to Bill O'Brien, who parlayed that into an NFL job, and James Franklin, who turned it into one of the best programs in the nation, but was fired because he couldn't win the big one. So with that resume, you would expect that this is a job that not only can put you into a position where you can go to a bigger place, but also one of the best jobs in the country, probably a top 5 job, at least going back to like the 70s or 80s. That's not where it's at right now. Right now, they cannot get anyone to basically return their call. The recruiting is miserable. I saw a statistic from 247 that said right now they are at the same place that Prairie View A&M, just outside of Houston, is an HBCU and FCS. So you're basically going to have to build that program from the ground up, despite it being a top-ranked team going into the season that had a couple of key injuries, lost a couple of key games, and all of a sudden saw their season kind of spiral away. I think this is an unexpected turn of events. I think this, if you can get it together, is still a top 3 to top 5 job in the Big Ten, if not a top 10, top 15 job in the country. But as it stands now, this team should not be good next year. And I think that's what's holding off a lot of these candidates like Sitake.
Are you now? We live in a really interesting footprint, Sam. Have you ever spent time in Salt Lake or Utah, the surrounding area?
I have not.
All right. Well, it's like an interesting dynamic where a lot of coaches in both the pro ranks and college ranks stay here forever. I mean, you're looking at Lavelle Edwards, Kyle Whittingham, who may step down, but if he does, it's after 21 years. Jerry Sloan. I could go down the list. So I never thought Kalani was leaving, but from an outsider's perspective, when you just hear like, well, wait a second, he said no to Penn State and yes to BYU. How does that land with you?
I think that the Utah jobs more generally are underrated as compared to the way that we look at SEC jobs. I think they're actually closer to the SEC jobs. When you really dig down deep into the data and look at football players per capita, particularly ones that go to the NFL, you have Utah as one of the highest and you have California as one of the highest. And the reality is you have great access to recruiting both of those markets when you are at Utah. And if you're at BYU, you can also recruit nationally due to the religious component, a la Notre Dame to a certain degree. And I think that access to the talent base, particularly as the Pac-12 has fallen off, basically it means you're competing with USC. Maybe you're competing a little bit with Fresno, but at this point, you're solidly part of a Power 5 conference, Power 4 conference, and 2 of the better teams in that conference, 2 of the better programs. And thus you can recruit basically unfettered the entire West. That's not really the case at Penn State. Obviously, you have access to Pennsylvania. You have access to New Jersey, 2 very populous areas, but typically you're not going to have that level of recruiting. You're going to have to go into Ohio and Michigan, really even stretch it down into Florida in the South and try to win those recruiting battles. That's why I think it's really interesting what Fran Brown has done at Syracuse this year. Real down year, but they're competing for 5 stars in Miami. There's a guy named Calvin Russell, a wide receiver from Miami Northwestern, who is going to Syracuse, 5-star recruit, one of the best wide receivers in the nation. And that's what you have to do at Penn State. James Franklin was able to do that. And I think it's going to be tough in the NIL era to really continue to do that as teams continue to grab a hold of their recruiting territories.
So just based off of your knowledge of watching BYU, and, look, Kalani 22-3 over the past 25 games, for the past 6 years, 10 wins. They win 11 this year. They're about to play for the Big 12 championship. What sort of coach, what sort of leader do you think Kalani is?
I mean, this is a guy who can lead championship winning programs. And he's shown that much despite not having, the best units of all time. They play complementary football and they win big games. And I think their appearance potentially in the college football playoff as a result is the crown jewel of that. And their back-to-back good performances in the Big 12 is even more of a sign of that. I'm a big proponent that the Big 12 really is one of the better conferences. I think regardless of whether or not they get two teams into the playoff, I think that, you have to play Utah, you have to play Arizona State, Iowa State. Colorado just got Brennan Marion as the offensive coordinator. That means they're hiring head coaches away from programs to come be offensive coordinators. That's generally the sign of a good program. And as a result, it's just a very competitive team in a very competitive conference. And I think that's why these programs like Penn State were interested as a result.
So Texas Tech won round one against BYU in Lubbock, and it really wasn't close. And Tech kicked 5 field goals. So I give credit to BYU for their red zone defense. The weird thing about Tech is their red zone offense isn't great. BYU has to run the ball to win, and the problem is that's where Tech shines, right? So Texas Tech, a 12.5-point favorite. Let's just get into this game for a moment, then have another question about the Big 12 as a whole. How does BYU, because it feels like, Sam, they have to win to get in. I don't know that there's going to be an at-large path. I don't think that that's right, but that's what the committee's telling us. Outline this for us. Outline, kind of profile a BYU upset. How could they get this done?
I think it's going to be tough to do it against that Texas Tech defense. This is not a Texas Tech team of old, though they do have a pretty good offense. I'd say probably a median level offense for a Power 4 school. This defense is absolutely loaded. Probably has 3 to 4 guys who will play in the National Football League across that front, headlined by guys like David Bailey, the transfer from Stanford, who is immensely good at those effort sacks that they were able to get after when they played BYU the last time. This is a kind of a matchup of 2 tiers. I think the 1A and 1B of college football right now, Texas Tech is in that top tier due to their defense. You look at their EPA per pass, number 5 in the country. EPA per rush, number 4 in the country. Their ability at not allowing teams to get the available yards on a drive, they're the best in the country. So the way that, Bear Bachmeier and the BYU offense is going to have to win this game is to kind of get after that deep. They're going to kind of have to match pace with the offense. And I think it's going to be tough against the defense. So I think this, if it goes BYU's way, needs to be low scoring. You need to have some good opportunities or opportunistic explosives from the offense, and you got to lean on the defense. I think this is a true variance decreasing game. I'd like to see BYU take handle of the time of possession. I think you try to limit the amount of possessions that this team has. That way you can't get the ball to some of those high-level wide receivers. They've struggled kind of, the Texas Tech offense, to get the ball to their wide receivers at times, especially when the quarterback is injured. But I think that is the name of the game. If they can keep this game a kind of rock fight, I think they have a chance.
All right, one more question here. I have a tough time believing that BYU is going to get this done, and that's more respect for Tech than anything. I mean, I was on the sidelines watching Tech run away from Utah here in Salt Lake. I just think they're really good. But if they don't win, it doesn't appear like there's a path for them. But my question to you, is that fair? And namely the Notre Dame comparison. BYU has a better strength of schedule. They have a better strength of record. Notre Dame's best win is SC. BYU's best win is Utah. Utah's ranked ahead of SC. They also have the top 25 win against Arizona, I believe, now at 18 after their strong finish to the season. Yet Notre Dame, who won't play this weekend, is not going to fall. So Why doesn't the committee seem to value BYU potentially as an at-large team when you compare some of the numbers that indicate maybe they are a team that deserves a little more love?
It's very interesting, and I was looking really deeply at this as it went on, and I think when you get into those 2-loss teams, the committee clearly seems to group those 2-loss teams into a couple items. And when you look at the advanced metrics that show competitiveness long term, Notre Dame is just better in them. Like the things like Football Power Index, which is based off of 20,000 simulations based on a bunch of key models and key metrics, Notre Dame is like third. But as you mentioned, the strength of record and resume, which really should, what did you achieve, really should be the way you get into this. Lean BYU and lean Miami as well. And so it's a very interesting data science problem of prediction versus description. I think BYU and Miami have had descriptively better seasons than Notre Dame has had. However, by all predictive metrics, Notre Dame is the better team. What does that mean for the playoffs? We have no clue. I mean, they have gotten on TV and tried to describe how they come to these rankings every single week, and they change things that they say about teams. We don't know really what the humans are doing. This is why years and years ago we settled on the BCS. Then we threw that away for the playoff. I like the playoff. I do still think that the BCS makes a little bit more sense, especially in an era where people are leaning on AI more and understand kind of what we're trying to measure here. All that being said, don't want to be biased. I do think Notre Dame is the better team when it comes down to it, but I think you're correct. They just did not achieve the same level of wins, despite, assumptively, if BYU does lose and thus has to challenge for that large bid, despite having the same amount of losses.
I believe there were 14 P4 teams that won 10-plus games in the regular season. I bring that up because, Utah just had an awesome year. They just did. It's being overshadowed because their rival beat them, and they're playing for a conference championship. And for the Utes, it looks like it's going to be the Vegas Bowl. And look, that's a fine bowl. It's probably one of the top 5 or 6 non-CFP bowls, but you're not going to be hanging a banner. Just give me a thought on, Devin Dampier wins Big 12 Newcomer of the Year. Spencer Fano, Offensive Lineman of the Year. He's going to make some money next year in pro football. We're waiting on Witt. Not sure what he's going to do, but just give me a thought on the season that was on the Utes.
Yeah, I mean, when it really comes down to it, they had that team, same kind of how we discussed it, predictive versus descriptive. Predictively, I think this is a top 10 team in the nation. They just lost the key games, and they were really tight games when it really came down to it. That's the way the season broke. You look at basically any offensive metric, they did a pretty good job, 10th in EPA per play, pretty good in success rate. I think this is an interesting case where the defense kind of did fail them a little bit this year, something that they've hung their hat on. And I think that kind of really showed up in particular in that Texas Tech game where they were kind of exposed. Even when Morton went out, the starting quarterback for Texas Tech, they were a little bit exposed. So I think, it's a very small chink in the armor, but that's the difference between making a college football playoff and not making it. And that's why we love college football, because the margins are so thin.
One more college football question, and I apologize if I'm going to botch this, but Green Wave, hats off to thee. We're out to fight for our victory, right? Is that how it goes? I mean, look, we've got to ask you about your alma mater because they've got a shot to knock on the door and maybe make it into the CFP. What's it like being an alum and watching this really cool story?
Look, I, at one point in my life, in my career, was part of the winningest senior class in Tulane history, or at least since they left the SEC in the 40s or the 50s or something like that. I went 6-6, 7-5, 6-6, and those 3 bowl games were considered one of the best senior classes of all time, and we were excited to do it at that time. Since then, this has become one of the best programs in the nation, a shining light for the G5, and a real show of what you can do when you embrace NIL policy and you embrace a player-focused, player-driven game set. That is what Willie Fritz did. That's what I was underneath. He did a great job of empowering players. He leaned into NIL at the right time. They go ahead and win the Cotton Bowl, send multiple players to the NFL. We bring John Sumrall in after making another conference championship game, and he takes the approach to the next level for a G5 program where this is a certified, top program in the country, and a program that people are willing to leave higher paying defensive coordinator positions at LSU to interview for this role. And that's the real difference between Tulane and a lot of the G5 right now, is the way that the program is run. You got to give all kudos all the way from the president, Michael Fitz, all the way to the athletic director, David Harris, down to that. And I think it's a real testament. I think this is a little different situation than Lane Kiffin. I think because we are a G5 program, everyone kind of expects this to be a launching off point, a platform point. I think a lot of the players that came in this year were transfers as a result of a lot of success in the past 3 years. And as a result, some are all going to Florida. I think this is kind of the last dance type team really bonding together, saying we're going to do this in the olive of green, and we're going to, try to go win a title. I think they do have the talent to compete in the college football playoff. I don't know if they have the true talent to make it through 3 or 4 games on the road. But it's been great, man. I mean, if you were to tell me, especially when I was young and living in South Louisiana, that Tulane was going to be one of the best jobs in the country, that people were willing to leave excellent jobs for, I don't know if I would have truly believed you. And now that's the case. So I'm more than proud to be a Tulane alum, and I'm excited for tomorrow's game.
The real question is, how did I do with the fight song? Because I just did the best.
I think you may know it better than me, man. Like it rang a bell, but typically after when I was trying to sing the fight song, I'd just come off the field and was just trying to get in the showers and get my injuries checked out. So you did it better than me.
Fair enough, buddy. Hey, we've got kind of like a sneaky big Thursday night game, which makes it fun. Sometimes these single window games can leave certain things to be desired, but the Cowboys have won 3 straight. They're still very much in the mix. And with what the Bears have done, like the Lions actually kind of need this one tonight as well. So give us a quick preview. Thursday Night Football.
This is probably one of the most intriguing games of the year. I think you look at 2 offenses that are 2 of the better ones in the league. However, the Cowboys is absolutely ascendant. Everything is clicking at the right time. They've somehow hammered on 3 draft picks across the offensive line in the past 2 years that just slot in. I don't know how Dallas drafts this well. It's quite shocking. I'd love to do some research organizationally into what they do, because they just slam first-round picks every year, going back to like Leighton Vander Esch, and you could frankly go even further back, and they've hit on their first-round picks. This is an ascendant offense behind CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson, and Dak Prescott, and they're able to run the ball with their offensive coordinator, run game coordinator, Clayton Adams, pulling a lot of really interesting schemes out on that side of the ball. You look at the Detroit offense right now, kind of a downward turn a little bit. They're really struggling on the interior of the offensive line. A lot of injuries up there. They tried to slot some mid to late round picks in to solve the problems there this year. It hasn't necessarily worked out. Amon-Ra St. Brown is banged up. Sam Laporta is out for the year. Brock Wright, their second tight end, who has played a lot over the past 3 years, is also injured. So there's just a lot of question marks on this offense. So this game will come down to the flip side, to the defenses. The Lions, by the numbers, are a good defense. The question is can they hold up against such a high-powered offense? Single high coverage is going to be what you want to take a look at in this game. If you're seeing a lot of wins from George Pickens on the outside in one-on-one coverage, I think this is the Cowboys game. Otherwise, I think if the defense can at least keep Pickens and Ferguson corralled, maybe CD gets what he typically gets, I think then it could be a Lions win.
Before I say you lose, last thing, I always like to kick the tires on the teams that draw a lot of interest here locally, and based off of proximity, we just have a ton of Broncos fans. And I don't remember a time in recent memory where there's more excitement around a team that just keeps figuring it out, right? They just keep figuring it out, and they're 10-2. They'll probably smoke the Raiders, so they're probably going to move to 11-2. Then we'll learn a little bit more because they're going to have the Packers. But are you buying what we're seeing from the Broncos? Should Bronco fans feel legitimately excited about their prospects?
The AFC is a mess right now. And the reason why is because you have the Broncos at the top, who are defensively, I mean, one of the best defenses we've seen maybe going back until that last Broncos Super Bowl team. But the offense just is not that great, slightly above average, 11th in EPA per play. And it's because of, some up and down play by Bo Nix. But when you get true up and down play, he's about average, and that's what they need. And he's not average. He's one of the best in the league at not taking sacks and really setting their drives back. And they basically built the entire offense out of that. It's been successful up till now. I think outside of the Patriots, I think the Patriots probably you can trust the most in the AFC right now because they have a good defense and a good offense. I wish we could say we could trust the Chiefs, but we can't even trust them to get in the playoffs right now. And I have very little trust in the Colts. You look at their last 4 to 5 weeks, they are down in the dregs of the league in passing success. If you cannot pass, you cannot do it in the playoffs. I think they're going to potentially lose both of the games to the Jaguars they have coming up, as well as lose the game to the Seahawks. The other game they have is the 49ers. There's a real chance they could lose out on the season. So I think, you trust the Broncos probably second most behind the Patriots in the AFC this year.
Sam, where can people go find your work, bud?
Yeah, go check us out, sumersports.com. And if you want a great preview driving home, going to watch Thursday Night Football, check out at Sumer Sports, SUMER Sports on YouTube. We discussed the Detroit Lions and why they should continue going for it on 4th down in this tough matchup against the Cowboys. Go check that out as you're driving home.
Thanks for the time. Go Green Wave. We'll chat soon, okay?
Thank you, Roll Wave.
All right, Sam Bruckhouse, alum, Tulane Green Wave. He played there. They've got a shot to make it into the CFP, man. Really, really fun story. Appreciate Sam's time. Thursday Night Football tonight. It is a sneaky big one. Both teams need it. The Cowboys right in the mix. The Lions been not as great as of late due to some injuries. So stay tuned. When we say goodnight, we're going to bring in Thursday Night Football. That game, of course, is on Amazon Prime. All right, before we catch a break, really excited to have my friends at Game Day Men's Health as a client on the station because I can speak to this personally and tell you that you will get results, okay? It's kind of that time of year where we're all setting like intentions or goals, New Year's resolutions as January approaches, and there's a good chance one of your goals might be to get back in shape or get in better shape. As we get older, it's just harder to do. I can speak to that because a couple of years ago, I made a goal. I said, look, I want to get into the best shape that I've ever been in as an adult. Sorry, all you kids in your 20s. It's easy. Nobody's impressed. Way to go. You got a six-pack, okay? Wait till you get older. It's just harder. So for about 3 months, I was working out every day. I was eating better. I'd cleaned up some habits, and I just didn't see a lot of progress. And I'd kind of set a 3-month kind of time frame because back in the day, that was kind of the deal. Work out for 3 months, you're kind of getting back at it. But as you get older, it just takes longer. So I was frustrated, and a friend of mine asked, hey, have you ever tried to supplement testosterone, which I had not done. So he recommended Game Day Men's Health. So I went in for a free consultation, and they're offering you that free consultation. Here's what that looks like. You go into one of their locations, Lehigh, Pleasant Grove, Cottonwood Heights is the one I use, and South Ogden as well. They take a little bit of blood, just takes a minute, and then they go over your levels with you and say, okay, you're kind of low here. You're doing all right over there. Here's what we have that can kind of help these levels get up. For me, it was testosterone therapy and also their peptides. Those are the two products I use. They also have semaglutide, tirzepatide. If your aunt showed up to Thanksgiving dinner and she's like 90 pounds lighter, well, she's probably using that. No shade, as the kids would say. It actually works. So if you need to lose a lot of weight, they can help through that as well. But after 3 months of utilizing their testosterone therapy and their peptides, the bros call it biohacking. And then, of course, there are no shortcuts to getting in shape. You still have to eat well and exercise. But the progress I made in the 3 months after I saw Game Day Men's Health was double, and I'm not exaggerating, the progress I had made during the prior 3 months when I was working out hard and then eating well, but without the supplementation. So these are products once upon a time kind of reserved for like rich people, athletes, celebrities. Super affordable now as a result of this deal. Okay, number one, you get the free consultation. But number two, if you go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com and book an appointment, make sure to tell them that you heard me talking about it. They're knocking 50% off your first-year membership, which makes it incredibly affordable. It's the same deal I have, and quite frankly, it's why I'm using it, in addition to the fact that it works. So get yourself back in shape, get your libido back up to where it needs to be, and go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Let's get you back in shape. Just going to take a couple of months. Our friends at Game Day Men's Health, Richard Smith, live in studio, coming up next on ESPN 700. Yes, he is back on the drive, and not just back on the drive. Our guy is live in studio on a Thursday afternoon. Richard Smith, 40 years with the Utah Jazz, now kind enough to grace us with his time. Smitty, hope you had a great Thanksgiving. How are you, sir?
Spence, I'm doing great. I trust you had a great trip back to the motherland in Connecticut.
It was lovely,
and had a good time.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's always a great time of year back there when you can be with family and stuff. Back in the New England areas, it's just a little bit special feeling. I think all the time.
Well, and we actually had 3 straight days of like 50 degrees and sunny.
Wow,
which you'll take back there as the weather gets colder. So, any fun plan? Did you hang around here, watch some sports, eat some turkey?
Yeah, we were just here with our family and hung out and did a lot of nothing, which I'm finding out, Spence, that I'm actually pretty good at. So
goals, Smitty. I hope to one day be able to have the ability to do nothing. I think I'll be very good at it.
There you go.
At some point. Hey, I wanted to start here, and we'll get to the whole hey, is Keontae a point guard thing or whatever. But we've been talking about this topically, and I was excited to have you in because I think you'll be really good at this as a transplant who has made Utah his home for what? 45
years.
45 years, yeah. There's just something really interesting about the dynamic of coaches, whether it's college or pro, making their home here and deciding, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's not just LDS people. I mean, Coach Sloan stayed here forever. And, I don't know how real the reports were that he could have had the Laker job, but my guess is there would have been plenty of teams that would have hired Jerry if he wanted to go. So we have Witt here, 20-plus years. We'll see what he does. Nobody knows. We're going to find out maybe tomorrow is the deadline. Kalani had a chance to take maybe one of the top 5 or 6 jobs in college football, depending on where you want to rank Penn State. I have been there. It is not really a great spot, but it's a storied program that's won national championships, and he would have made generational money. He gets generational money. He stays in Provo. Jason Kreis was here for 7-8 years, left to take other opportunities, and could not wait to get back. Why do you think this is? Well, it really is pretty unique when you look around the landscape of college and pro sports that our coaches want to stay here and say no. I didn't even mention Lavelle, who could have coached the Lions, and he just wanted to stay. Why do you think it is?
Well, I think it's a lot of it, Spence, has to do with the lifestyle here in this region, in this part of the country. And quite frankly, the people that make it up. It's I hear time and time again from people, whether they move here or whether they just visit for a short period of time, it always seems to come back to people commenting on how nice the people are in the Salt Lake area, in the Utah region in general. Mm-hmm. Just how they feel safer, they feel more welcome. They think that it's an easier lifestyle. Obviously, the traffic has gotten a little bit, heavier here in this area in the last 5 to 10 years. Of course, with the I-15 corridor between here and the Provo area and the Silicon Slopes and all that business booming up. But aside from that, which isn't that bad, as you and I know, if you go to other parts of the country, whether it's L.A. or New York or San Francisco or Chicago or wherever you want to go, the traffic here isn't anything like it is in other parts of the country. And yet that's the biggest issue when you're talking about lifestyle. You're talking about going to work every morning. You're talking about what you can do on the nights and weekends with your family or with friends and the opportunities both intellectually, both in the downtown area, whether it's theater, sports, and the like, or whether it's the outdoors activities with the mountains and the skiing and the hiking and all the summer stuff. I mean, it's just a great lifestyle, and I think that people, once they get here and experience it, for those who come and work for a certain period of time, just find that, hey, I'm not sure I'm going to find anything that's better, that fits whatever the different things are that I want to do. So why would I move somewhere else? It's very easy to live here, and I think that's what people experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting to consider, and I'm all because you referenced the traffic, and I have to check myself a little bit because at times, I'll be on remote. Sometimes you come out and meet us on remote and do the show, which I always appreciate. And if I run into traffic on the way home, I'll get home and be like, man, it took me 20 minutes to get home today. And I'm like complaining about it, you know, and
yeah.
I just really, it's so dumb. And I'm always reminded of it when I'm home. Because as you know, flying back, my dad says, hey, what time's your flight? I said, it's at 4. He said, okay, we'll leave at noon. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, check the Van Wyck. It's backed up. We're leaving at noon. And sure enough, we got there just in time to get through TSA and make the flight. If I have a 4 o'clock flight in Salt Lake, I'll leave at 2:45.
Yeah, right.
And maybe even later than that. So the ease is certainly a thing. The good living is certainly a thing. Logistically, it's very it just doesn't pose a lot of challenges that other places do. How have you seen it change and grow in 45 years here as a resident?
Yeah, well, it's just the numbers, Spence, and it's the fact that it used to be when I first moved here, it was predominantly an LDS culture, and obviously so. And in the last 20, 25 years, it's become a little more diversified with the workforces, with the different companies, industries that are moving into this general area, all the way along the Wasatch Range between Ogden and Provo area. A lot more people outside of the LDS faith who are coming and working here or making their home here. So you see a little bit more of diversification in just general lifestyle in that regard. I see even one of the simple things like the Jazz now playing several home games on Sundays, where they never did that before when they first moved here, and when Frank Layden was the general manager and making the schedules from year to year, he was always counseled by the local leaders that you really should stay away from Sunday home games, even though that's a normal thing in the NBA for this culture. And Frank always said, okay, if that's what we should do. So they did that for the longest time. And now you see that that's just kind of evolved and it's changed in the last several years. And some of it's, the need for the use of the building with the Delta Center, with the Utah Mammoth now demanding 41 home dates as well during the hockey season. But they still could get around that if they wanted to. But I think they just see that, hey, that's just, we have some kind of a population that will respond in a positive way to having games on a Sunday when maybe 10 years, 15 years ago, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. And so they're not afraid to go ahead and do that. And I think those are the kinds of things that you see just in general day-to-day life that tell you that it's just becoming a little bit more diversified and a little more outside influences coming in to this part of the state.
And you referenced Frank. I should have led with Frank, the original transplant who didn't just stay here to coach, but stayed here to live after he left the organization.
Yeah, and that was a lot. Some of it was because his family was here. He had 2 kids who were growing up and were young adults, and they have their families here, and he wanted to be around them. But also, with Frank and Barbara Layden, they just found the lifestyle to be something that was amenable to what they wanted to do. They liked the theater. They liked the arts. They liked, the sports. And they were able to engage in all of those things and not only with buying tickets and sponsoring, but also helping those kind of different areas to grow and thrive in this community. And Frank always used to say, hey, why would I move? I live right behind the conference center. I can go to anything I want to go to in 10 minutes. Why would I try and trade up for something else where, like you say, I got to deal with the Van Wyck, so I got to leave 4 hours before to get to the airport. And those are things I think, Spence, a lot of times people, they don't look at the simple, everyday, day-to-day stuff that makes up your life, and the little things that are always part of your daily living. And when you look at those things, that's why I think a lot of people are coming here and staying here and making this their home.
Yeah, and I don't know. Well, I'll go further than that. I didn't have a frame of reference for it until we moved and experiencing that lifestyle. And then I spent 8 months. When I was going to school, working in New York and taking the train every morning and the train every night. I'm like, this kind of sucks. I don't really love this. I don't want to say people here take it for granted, But if you don't have the other experience of what it's actually like to really grind, I mean, it's not even airport flights. Where my parents live, if we go to the grocery store, it's a 30-minute drive to a decent grocery store. You want to go get a cup of coffee, you better lock out 45 minutes of your day to do it. Again, I don't want to accuse people here of taking it for granted, but I wonder how many people that maybe have never had the experience really understand just what a uniquely convenient place this is to exist.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're seeing, more transplants. You're seeing more people come through. You're seeing, obviously it's a great state to work in, and the way that the state government has set it up, that numerous businesses find that it's really good in terms of tax credits and ability to run their business in this state. And that's why you're seeing the burgeoning, Silicon Slopes area growing more and more. And that brings more people in from outside the state. I think but how many people leave? How many people grow up here and spend the first formative years of their life, 20, 25 years, whatever, and then get married or start a family, whatever, and decide to leave and go somewhere else? I don't know what those numbers are. My guess is that it's not really high, because I
feels
think
low.
I think that people, they get used to something, but they also become comfortable in it, and other people are coming in and seeing how that is and taking advantage of it.
And look, I understand it's not for everybody, and ultimately there are a lot of people that do move here and find the cultural oddities hard to traverse and decide to leave. But I did want to ask you about Jerry specifically, because of course he was a close friend of yours and you worked with him for a number of years. And I can remember hearing that the Lakers wanted him. And like I said, I mean, with Jerry's success here, I'm sure there were plenty of teams that would have loved to have a chance to bring him in. It felt like such a perfect marriage. It's milk and cookies, or wine and cheese, whatever you prefer. Jerry and the Jazz, for a number of different reasons. But when it came to his tenure, what stood out most to you about why he wanted to make this home?
Well, first of all, this is he's able to live a lifestyle here that's not very dissimilar from where he grew up in Southern Illinois. He can get around easily on the streets. He had a beautiful home out in Harriman, and where he had land and he could breathe, and that kind of a feeling of your day-to-day lifestyle. You talk about other jobs, Spence. I know at least several, including Milwaukee and Portland, and you mentioned the Lakers, who all reached out and tried to get him, convince him to come out of retirement and to help their franchises, and part of it was his lifestyle, part of it was like, I think I'm done. That's okay, and didn't want to go someplace. Jerry was very much like a lot of us, a creature of habit, of comfort, of the things that he was comfortable with and that he was familiar with. And so, once he got something that he liked and something he was comfortable with, he was never looking for something different. We would stay in the same hotels, on the road year after year after year, and they're terrific. And there was always some new hotel, and whether it's in L.A. or in Chicago or in New York, and someplace where they would say, oh, this new fancy hotel is they want us to come and stay there. They're trying to get NBA business, whatever. And Jerry said, the hotel we're at is fine. The Ritz-Carlton in Marina Del Rey, it's fine. We don't need to be going downtown, and but that was just the way he was. And so when it came to taking a new job at his age in life where he was, I think he just felt like, that's going to be something I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to get, figure out something that's new, new staff, new players. I don't know if it's worth it, whatever. And I think living here was just something that he had gotten comfortable with, and new people, knew his way around. And was his personality. And that's what made him very comfortable to stay here after retirement.
The Ritz-Carlton in Marina Del Rey is a fine hotel option, Smitty. Respectfully.
No, it's that is a great place. I'll tell you what, one of our and this is a great Jerry Sloan anecdote, but we would have when the Jazz would play the Lakers at the Forum, and we would play the Clippers down at the old Sports Arena, and then of course they both eventually moved to the Staples Center, which is right downtown L.A. But regardless, we would stay at the Marina Del Rey, Ritz-Carlton. We would have our practice either at one of those gyms, or we wouldn't go to the Staples Center for shoot-around the day of the game, but we would go to a local high school, usually Inglewood High School, that's near the Forum, about 10 minutes away from the hotel, and we would have a shoot-around. And then on the way back to the hotel, the bus driver knew enough from over the years that he would go down Jefferson Street, stop at the stoplight. The door would open to the bus. Jerry and Phil and whoever else wanted to come, was usually staff or coaches, would get off the bus, and they would walk up to the second floor in Marina Del Rey to the soup plantation, what we know as sweet tomatoes, and the salad bar place. And guys would get off, and the players would go, "Where are those guys going?" They go, "Yeah, they're going to lunch, whatever." Then the bus would take the players back to the hotel, and the staff, led by Jerry, would go to Sweet Tomatoes, get a salad bar, lunch, whatever, and then walk about a mile or so back to the hotel along the main drag there in Marina Del Rey. And that was the routine forever, Spence. That was forever. In fact, you would get up in the morning, you would get on the bus, go to the shoot-around, and you'd be going, "I can't wait to get to that salad bar at noon because I know it's coming," and that was just Jerry. He found something that he liked, whatever it was, and you could lock it in, and he would do the same routine, day after day, week after week, year after year. That was the way he was, and that was one of the great parts of being around during those years, with him, is that there are always things that you could count on.
That's so many amazing things about that feel very Jerry. Fun that you were able to have a front row seat to all that. Before we catch a break, and you can keep any of this to yourself, as you know, I'm just wondering if you think there was ever an offer at any point while he was here that Jerry was like, "Okay, I've got to look at that." Was there ever a job offer that came his way that you think he legitimately looked at taking? he was always famously on one-year deals, right, with
he and Larry Miller, and that was always the arrangement. And the arrangement was it was more Jerry, because he always felt like, I don't know how long I want to do this. I don't know if circumstances are going to change either with the team or how we're managed, in the front office or with ownership. I don't want to lock myself into something where I sign a 5-year contract and I'm beholden to it. And then in the second year, things go awry and I don't like what's happening and now I'm stuck, kind of thing. So he always felt comfortable enough in saying, I'm just going to sign a 1-year deal. And Larry and I meet every year after the season. What do you think? How's it going? This and that, whatever. Handshake deal, whatever. I think we're going to do this. You want to do it again? Yeah, whatever. And, some of that always felt like a formality because it felt like Jerry's not going anywhere. He's ensconced in this franchise, this organization. He can do what he wants. He calls his own shots. Larry knew that, and it was a very comforting feeling to know that was going to go on until Jerry decided that he didn't want to do it anymore, which obviously we know that day eventually did come, but all those years it was always him just deciding, hey, these guys may also be tired of me.
Sure. And
they may decide they want to move on to something else, and he was always very objective about all that stuff, Spence. He, for all the rah-rah and camaraderie and everything that we our group was able to build over the years and with each other and have a very stable group both in the front office and on the coaching staff. Jerry was always very objective about, hey, things could change tomorrow. And if they do, that's okay. I get it, and we just shake hands and we move on or whatever it's going to be. And that was also part of that culture that we had for such a long time.
If a more pragmatic person existed than Jerry, I'd like to know. It just seems like that was his deal, right? He just approached life pragmatically, Not a lot of highs, not a lot of lows. Yeah, there were sideline outbursts where he'd get run or he'd get into it with a player, this or that, but it just seemed like the day-to-day existence of the man was very measured.
Well, I'll tell you what, Spence, those things that fans saw, that was real because Jerry was a competitive person. And when he got out there and got ready for the game, he wanted everybody to be ready, and everybody had to be ready to go with whatever their responsibility was. And, and he got into the games, and he was competitive, and he didn't want to lose, and he wanted every edge and all that. And when you saw him fly off the handle, and he got run out of a game, and was yelling at a referee, and Phil had to hold him back, or whatever. And then he'd go to the locker room, and when you'd get in the locker room, whether it was halftime or at the end of the game, whenever that would occur, he was sitting in his office. It was as if nothing had ever happened, okay, what do we got tomorrow? What are we doing? Whatever. It was just, he was able to flush it away, forget about it. He didn't like the fact that he did it. He didn't like the fact that he did it out in public where everybody would see that, personality of his at that moment, but he also understood that was part of the job sometimes was to do that. For the benefit of the team, but he was always great, whether it was a big win, a bad loss, a tough loss, a last minute thing, whatever it was. He was always great at 20 minutes after the game, being able to just get rid of it and okay, what do we got tomorrow? We got practice, or we got another game, or we're getting on the bus, we're getting on the plane, whatever it was. He never dragged it home. I remember one of the great stories. Was Mike Fratello coming in one time trying to get pregame information from us, and he asked Phil and Jerry about watching film, how they watch film after the game, like a lot of coaches would do, stay in the office till 2 a.m. watching the film of the game that just occurred, trying to dissect what happened for practice the next day. And remember Phil famously saying to Mike Fratello, Mike, what do you mean watch it? Well, how you watch a game after. You watch the whole fourth quarter, you watch just the pick and rolls, you watch the transition plays, what do you do? And Phil goes, Mike, we don't watch the film after the game. He goes, yeah, well, you watch some film, right? And Phil goes, Mike, I was at the game. We know what happened. We'll address it tomorrow in practice. And Mike Fratello was dumbfounded, like, are you serious? And Jerry goes, what, I've been here long enough. I got to go home. I don't have time for this stuff.
Love it. Just love it. All right, we'll catch a break. But coming up next, my first year in radio was 2003, but it was very much part-time. My first year with a consistent radio presence in the market was 2005. There was a draft that year. There were a couple of point guards available. The Jazz took one. The other one's in the news. So we'll talk about that with Smitty coming up next. But before we catch a break, our friends at Advanced Window Products are holding a holiday special for you right now. So here's the deal. We're talking Nate Orchard, still the mayor of Sac Lake City, longtime NFL vet. His buddy Jake Weber. This is a family-owned business. They are excellent people. They will take care of you. This is a high-quality operation. You don't have anything to worry about. They're honest. And ultimately, right now, you can save $3,500 when you buy 10 windows or more. So the weather's getting cold. If you come home from work and you notice your house is cold and you have your heat up, it's probably because of your windows. So if you've been holding off, the good news is you waited for the right time. You get $3,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more with our friends at Advanced Window Products. Here's the other great part of the deal. If you don't need new windows now, but you think you might need new windows in about a month or two, just call today and get on the schedule, and you lock in the savings of $3,500 with our friends at Advanced Window Products. So give them a call right now today at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. More with Smitty coming up next on ESPN 700. We got Smitty live in studio. Always enjoy when we can spend some time together on this Thursday afternoon. We will do a little sports score with our friends at Handy and Handy. Don't forget, we will bring you Thursday Night Football tonight. It's kind of a sneaky big one between the Cowboys and the Lions. Both teams very much alive in the playoff chase. So stay tuned for that. Your TV is Amazon Prime, and, of course, we'll have the radio coverage for you. All right, Smitty, Chris Paul is in the news, and it's not good news. And, it's interesting because I've always loved Chris Paul. He's always been my guy. There was this really cool story when he was in high school before he went to Wake, where, one of the final games he had in high school, his grandfather had just passed, and I believe his grandfather was in his 60s, thereabouts, and Chris decided, I'm going to go score 64 points tonight for my grandpa. He had 63 points. He got fouled, hit a free throw, then airballed the second one and collapsed in his mom's. I just thought it was a really cool story. Obviously, he was awesome in college. And I can remember, if I remember correctly, you guys made a deal with Portland to move up to 3.
Right.
In the 2005 draft. And obviously, I'm not in the room, so you guys did your analysis and your scouting. But I stood up off the couch when I saw the trade, and I'm like, they're going to draft Chris Paul. And then, boom, it's Darren.
Yep.
And as the story goes, that was kind of a Jerry thing. He, really – and look, both of them were awesome. Chris's career was longer. Darren had this 3 or 4 year very elite run, and I used to get a kick out of them going head-to-head. Darren wanted to beat him big time, and he did more often than not head-to-head. For our listeners, take us through that process. 2005, you make the trade, you have your pick, and the other point guard was Ray Felton, but it felt like it was Chris Paul and Darren that you guys debated between. Why'd you land on Darren? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we were picking 6 in that draft, and Kevin O'Connor was able to make a trade, a couple of draft picks to move up from 6 to 3 because we really felt like we needed to add a good point guard, and we thought there were 2 really good point guards in that draft, being Darren Williams and Chris Paul. And then the third one, as you mentioned, was Raymond Felton from North Carolina. And as it happened, those guys ended up going 3, 4, 5. Raymond Felton didn't have quite the career that Chris Paul or Darren Williams have had, but was a good, solid NBA player. But our group was kind of split. We were kind of, going back and forth, and it could have been any one of those guys. And it really, in the room, I think at any moment in time, you could have taken a coin and just flipped it. And, guys would have said, okay, yeah, and shrugged and go, okay, whatever. Yeah, take that guy or that guy. And Jerry obviously has a good voice in the room. But one of the things about Jerry that he always exhibited during our draft meetings and executing the draft every year was that he would always have an opinion. He would always be watching film, study guys, talk about guys. But at the end of the day, he would always go back to the scouting staff and say, and finish any kind of comment he had with something along the lines of, well, that's the way I think, but you guys know better than me. You study it all year, so whatever you guys think we should do. And he would always do that. And Kevin put a lot more weight on Jerry's opinion than that. But Jerry always wanted to make sure that he knew that there were guys working hard on that all year and that they deserved to have an equal voice in the room, whether it was or not. At least that's how he always wanted to make sure that it was seen. So that particular year, he liked Darren a little bit more just because of his size. Because of his strength. He thought that he had, maybe a little more toughness. I always thought that Chris Paul was a tough guy, even for his size, kind of a diminutive point guard in stature, but had some toughness in him, which has been shown throughout his career. But Jerry liked Darren a little bit better because of the size factor. 6'3" versus 6 feet, 6'1", whatever Chris Paul is, and so Darren was very good for a lot of years. People forget not only All-Star years with the Jazz, but also was on the 08 and the 12 Olympic teams.
Yep.
Those 2 teams, the USA Basketball thought enough of him during that run that he was one of the guys they wanted to have in that mix, but yeah. It was one of those you could debate on and off, and And nobody wins the debate at the end of the day. You've just spent a lot of time discussing it and going through the pros and cons, but it could have gone either way. But that was we had good years with Darren, and then it ended the way it did. And those are the kind of things that you can't predict. But then again, you look at Chris Paul's career, 21 years now. And he says this is going to be his last year, but look at how many teams he's played for and how many teams moved him, or that he tried to talk his way. Sometimes it gets, that stuff gets a little lost in the shuffle sometimes, and how guys are deal with the business and how things are handled behind the scenes. And Chris wasn't unaffected by that. He's been bounced around a little bit as well during his career.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider because it's kind of the same thing with the Durant stuff where you're just like, man, he's too good to play for 4, 5, 6 different teams. Now, it's a different league where players do that in a way they didn't back then. But there has to be something about Chris's personality. For all of his brilliance, for a minute, no one is ever breaking Stock's assist record, probably Steele's record. Those two appear to be really safe. But for a minute, you're like, well, maybe it could be this guy if he lasts 20 years and continues to do it. And he's going to finish second, and he's a Grand Canyon away from John. But for all of his brilliance as a player, there has to be something about either his leadership style or his abrasive nature. He's always talking to somebody. He's either talking to the ref, he's talking to the other team, he's talking to the fans, he's talking to his own teammates. Because throughout the course of his career, Hornets, Clippers, Rockets, OKC, Phoenix, Golden State, San Antonio, Clippers again. And they were just like, dude, go home. We're sick of this, whatever it is. Any insight as to is it an abrasive nature to his personality? Like, despite all of his brilliance, why has Chris Paul bounced around the way he has?
Well, I mean, in this regard, Spence, just painting it with a broad brush, Chris Paul is a very competitive guy. That's what makes him a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a tough guy. He's not going to back down. I think some of it, a little bit of it, from my opinion, from 30,000 feet away, is just that he's, maybe in this world of the NBA, maybe a little bit of the Napoleonic attitude of I'm the smaller guy here. You think you're going to punk me? No, I'm going to get you first. And so he comes at you all the time. That stuff is seen as good, strong, tough leadership when you're on teams that are winning and when you're on teams that are competitive and playing well. That's the kind of guy that you look at and go, yeah, he's our leader. He's the guy making it happen, okay? When you're on a team that's struggling, like the Clippers are out of the gate this year, and you're on the bench, and you're not playing much, and you're not contributing in one way or another to how the team is doing at the moment, then that stuff starts to become a little abrasive, and it starts to become a little gnawing, and you start to say, yeah, hey, dude, I heard it. Okay, thanks. And then he'll keep chirping about whatever it is. It could be during the games on the bench, not playing certain guys, or how come, I don't know if it would be, how come I'm not in, but, this guy shouldn't be playing, or talking to coaches about, why are we doing that, or in the locker room with guys, and on the team plane and in the hotel. Chris's nature is to be competitive and to question, what's going on, especially if things aren't going well. And I can see in a scenario for the Clippers, with all due respect to, other people who have, opinions from the outside looking at it, when you're in a position like Chris Paul and you're not contributing and not helping to what we're trying to do by being on the negative end of it and being abrasive and not really contributing to what's happening, we are trying to get this thing going. And my man, you are not helping us. You're supposed to be helping us by being a positive influence, talking with guys on the bench in a positive way, trying to keep it flowing that way. You got it going the other way. We've talked to you about it a few times. You keep doing it your way. That's not helping the cause. So let's do this. Why don't you just go home and we'll just figure out something else, because this isn't working in the current status. Maybe if it was 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you're one of the guys running the show. Okay, now we deal with it in a different way. But today, in your situation, when you've already told us this is your last year, we've come out of the gate 5-16. We're not playing the way we want as a team, the way we're capable of. We brought in all veterans like you, like Brooke Lopez, like Bradley Beal, John Collins. It's not working for whatever reason. You're not helping us with your attitude. Let's just cut it off. And I give Lawrence Frank all the credit for agreeing with Ty Lue and whoever else was in on that. I'm sure Steve Ballmer weighed in, and he said, "I'll take care of it, and let's just cut it off where it is here, and we move on." And so that's what the deal is.
Yeah, it's always been somewhat interesting to me to consider as to why he seems to rub people the wrong way. But I do want to go back to, because you reference, and I'm looking some stuff up here in real time. The fact that Jerry very much, well, I don't want to overstate it, but Jerry preferred Darren over Chris Paul. And when you look at Darren's rookie season, as you remember, Jerry didn't play him initially.
Right.
It was Milt Palacio and Keith McLeod as kind of the starters. And it did seem like when Darren got a chance to get some minutes, I mean, certainly with all due respect to Keith McLeod and Milt Palacio, Darren had a much higher ceiling than those two. Yeah. And then in the second half of the year, if I remember correctly, that's when Jerry kind of gave Darren the starts and the minutes, and he really started to fly. So much so that I think Ron Boone voted him Rookie of the Year, and Chris Paul got all the other votes. But nonetheless, what was going on with that dynamic? I mean, to your point, it did seem like Jerry's vote may have swayed the pick. It's Darren's the pick, and then didn't play him for a minute. And he played Millsap that year, I believe.
Yeah. Well, Jerry wanted to he wanted to make sure Darren didn't get a big head right out of the chute and think that you're coming in, you're the third pick in the draft. This is your team. Here's the ball. Go get him. And he didn't want to set that precedent early, so he wanted to play some guys who had been around a little bit. Keith McLeod, Milt Palacio, solid veterans. Obviously not the talent level or skill level that Darren Williams had, but he wanted Darren to learn by sitting on the bench, watching the games unfold, learn the NBA game from watching from the bench for a while, understand what goes on and trying to win an NBA game, and then kind of ease him into it. And that was just how Jerry wanted to handle him. I think some of it was his personality. I think once Jerry got around him on a daily basis, he kind of felt like, well, if I just throw him in there, he's going to think that we just gave him the whole store right out of the chute, and I don't want to set that precedent. So I'm going to hold him back a little bit. Remember, it's a different context, obviously, but 20 years earlier, John Stockton came in, and John Stockton was a first-round pick and probably not as highly rated as Darren Williams was in the draft scenario. But John came in and wasn't the starter until early his third season. He played the first 2 years behind Ricky Green, who was an all-star. But that was, and Jerry was around that, and Jerry saw that had some value to John learning how the game was being played, how the NBA runs, and John earned his stripes and so forth. But Jerry had been part of that, so Jerry kind of knew that a guy who's up top, leading the team as a point guard, he wanted to make sure Darren was ready to deal with that, not just the physical part of playing and his skill level and talent, but also the mental part of how you approach, the NBA game by game. And so I think that was part of his indoctrination into the league. It's
interesting to consider as to whether or not, because as you're outlining, Jerry, and I'll just kind of paraphrase, didn't want Darren to have this entitlement type attitude. He wanted to kind of earn his stripes a little bit. Well, it's interesting to consider that Darren and Donovan were kind of here. Darren was here a little bit longer, but they were both here about 5.5 years before, Donovan ultimately traded to Cleveland. Darren traded to the New Jersey Nets at the time, kids. It's a real thing. as the story goes, Smitty, it was that night in February. It was a game against the Bulls where allegedly Jerry was calling plays and Darren was ignoring him. And then that led to the whole blow up where Jerry stepped aside. And 2 weeks later, Kevin trades Darren to New Jersey. To the extent that you're comfortable, take us behind the scenes there. That night, what happened, how it all went down.
Yeah, well, it was, it was something. It wasn't like this thing where Lawrence Frank got on and had a virtual press conference about the Chris Paul thing, and it said this wasn't a one incident thing. There wasn't like something happened and we didn't like it, so you're out of here kind of thing. This is something that's been building up and adding layer upon layer upon layer. The Darren Williams and Jerry Sloan thing that's been well chronicled was very similar. That year, Darren did, was acting in a bit of an entitlement phase of his career. Felt like things should be, done through him. That he should be the guy who, should be running the show, so to speak, in terms of the playing. And he felt like he was comfortable enough, at that stage in the NBA to kind of run the show out there as the point guard. And Jerry didn't run it like that. He never ran it with John like that. For 19 years, working together. John always Jerry always was the one who was controlling things on the sideline. And Darren Williams, just wasn't going to have it. Was pushing back, and it just came to a head. And that was the end of it. It wasn't that. You're correct in remembering that it was against the Chicago Bulls, and it was a game that it was at halftime that an argument ensued, and then from there, Jerry decided that he was gonna step aside and just didn't want to deal with it anymore. But that's that was between those guys, and that was just something that was starting to boil over slowly, over weeks and probably the previous couple of months. And I think it was just something that, at that moment in time, Jerry felt like, and again, this is one of the reasons, Spence, that Jerry and Larry always had these year-to-year contracts, because Jerry always felt like, hey, something could happen and something could change my mind and from one day to the next, and I don't want to have to be locked into something that's not something I want to continue doing. And that happened, famously or infamously, with the Darren Williams time, and which is very unfortunate. And that team, my opinion, Spence, was always that group could have done a lot more than it did if we had a different type of approach to it in terms of the personalities. I mean, Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer, Mehmet Okur, Andre Kirilenko, that was a solid group with Ronnie Brewer at the off guard. Paul Millsap coming up behind. That was a good group that could have done a lot more and was in position to do a lot more age-wise, because they were all a similar age. They all could have been growing up together and had that 8, 9, 10-year run, which didn't happen. Which you look back on, we see Oklahoma City doing so great now, but you think back, Oklahoma City had the same kind of thing where in consecutive drafts they took Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook, and had a great group that should still be together today. If you think about it, in a perfect OKC Thunder world, those guys would be on the process of aging out now, but would have won X number of championships and would have been the core of a team playing together for 13, 14, 15 years. And it just didn't happen because of personalities and stuff that gets in the way and those kinds of things that as a group you try to manage and you do your best. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, and you have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made that that's the second best team we've had here, and there was a conference final appearance. Every time you guys ran up against the Lakers, it felt like the Bynum-Gasol length was tough for Booz. But, you reference Booz, AK, D-Will, Millsap, Memo, but also Wes Matthews, also Kyle Korver. CJ Miles played some good minutes for you guys too. That was a good team, potentially the second best team we've ever had here. He was never the same, Darren. He put up some numbers with New Jersey and Brooklyn, but ultimately you kind of wonder what it would have looked like. We always do this kind of look back with the Mitchell Gobert group, where the new ownership group decided to dismantle. But I think it's very fair to look back on that and just because Darren, 5 years. He could have stayed here another 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, I think it's fair to wonder if there was meat left on that bone.
Oh, there was a lot, Spence, and if you keep the group together, if you're able to do that, we would, it's been talked about quite a bit over the years with, and Shaquille O'Neal's been one of the outspoken ones about his time with Kobe Bryant and saying, we should have had a longer run, and we should have been able to work it out, and we should have been able to just figure out what made sense for the overall group as a whole and for our careers and our legacies and all that stuff. And in that group with D. Will and Booze and AK Memo, those guys should have played together a lot longer than they did. They got along well. It was, sometimes those things, there's a crack in the armor and you can't glue it back together and the things get away from each other. And, it's funny you say that. I just been watching the new Beatles anthology that's on Disney Plus,
which is
fantastic. Mm-hmm. And they talk about those guys, starting to, see it, cracking. And even though they're all brothers and they think the world of each other and all that, they just could see it, coming down the road, that it was just coming to a logical conclusion at some point that was just going to divide all of them. And that's what happens with teams. And that's the hardest thing in professional sports, Spencer, is when you have a group that's working together and is having some success, is the management part of that, both from the coaching staff and from the ownership group and front office, to try and manage that and try and keep everybody on the same road, working in the same direction. A lot of times it's either a personality situation like it was with the D. Will and Booze group, or a lot of times it become a money situation like it was in OKC with Durant and Westbrook and Harden, where when their times came up early in their careers, everybody wanted to get paid, and they tried to tell them, hey, we can't pay everybody what you want, but we can pay you, something that makes sense, and we want to keep the group together. And everybody said, no, I want mine, and that's what happens. And you just can't figure it out that makes any logical sense. But I think a lot of times in those situations, athletes look back after their career and they go, yeah, I should have had more common sense to do it this way or that way. And, obviously those are when it's too little too late. But you try and invoke that in the moment when you're dealing with it as a management group to try and figure it out and get some common sense laid in. And more often than not, it doesn't work out for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and it's always tough because it's always easy to say, what would have happened here, or if you drafted this guy instead of that guy. You make the best choice you can in the moment, hope it works. Last thing on this, Larry passed in 2009. Do you think a Larry Miller presence could have salvaged that, when it came? Because from what I recall, Gail and Greg tried to get Jerry to stay, and maybe Larry had a different sort of, or maybe Jerry's just going to do what Jerry wanted to do.
Yeah, I would say my opinion, Spence, would probably be the way it fell apart and the way it ended up being was Jerry was going to do it the way that he needed to do it for himself, and because they there could have been cooler heads. There could have been talked about some more. That wasn't really going to be Jerry's style at that point in his career. And look, it's Phil felt the same way, and And Jerry said when he was leaving, if he was leaving, Phil said, they said, well, Phil, will you take over? Phil said, no, if Jerry's leaving, I'm leaving. And, and that's when they promoted Ty into the position and then made the moves and that they did shortly thereafter with Darren. But that stuff is always comes into play when personalities are involved and strong personalities. And if you can't get them together on the same page, then you have to do something that seems to make sense at the moment you're making the decision so that everybody can move on and try and pick up the pieces from there.
Look, we should talk about the Jazz right now because that's one of the reasons we have you in.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I actually am curious about, because we know the deal, they're going to win a few games, they're going to lose a lot of games, and it's all about seeing if these young kids can progress. But the top 8 protected pick to OKC, after this year, that goes away.
Yes.
And I'd forgot. If I knew that, I'd forgotten. We were talking about it with McMahon this week. So is it safe to say, based off of that dynamic, maybe this is the final year we do this dance where the approach to competitiveness is very unserious?
Well, it's gonna be interesting, Spence, because they brought in the short-term veterans, meaning the guys who are all on one-year deals that expire at the end of this year. Yusuf Nurkic, Kevin Love, Kyle Anderson, and George Niang are all on expiring deals. So they're going to have a bunch of money next summer to be able to do something with, whatever that would be. But at the same time, they've also got a top 8 protected pick in next spring's draft. And so if the Jazz are one of the worst 8 teams in the league this year, then they would be able to keep that pick. If they finish 9 through 30 in the overall standings, then they have to send the pick to OKC. And so when you get to February and the trade deadline and where the Jazz are going to be, it's going to be very interesting for them because they're going to have to make a management and an ownership decision. Are we just going to keep playing the way we are currently, trying to be competitive, playing well on some nights, playing not well on other nights, having a below 500 record, but are we going to allow ourselves to play just good enough to be in that gray area when it comes to the last 15, 18, 20 games of the season that could jeopardize that top 8 protected pick and the chance to get another lottery pick somehow through the draft next spring? Or are we just going to be competitive and finish 12th or 13th in the standings, win 34 games, not make the playoffs, and also lose our draft pick? That's going to be an interesting decision because then they're going to be in a position now what do we do? Do we sit all those veteran guys that we have and just let that ride and let the young guys play and hopefully lose games like they did last year and try to manipulate the system and do what they did last year? Or are they going to try and as Austin Ainge said, we're not going to do that. So they're just going to play and let it fall where it will and potentially lose that draft pick. That's going to be an interesting decision that we'll see how they're dealing with that toward the end of February, early March. That'll be really the key and how they're managing the rest of this season.
Just feels like you can't lose that asset, right?
Yeah, but again, if how do you do that? How do you play that game? Look, we just see today, that the Cleveland Cavaliers were fined $250,000 for not playing Darius Garland, and they had already been fined. I didn't even remember this back a month ago or so. Fined for doing the same thing with Donovan Mitchell and Mobley and not playing them, and they got fined $100,000 for doing that, and so now they've been fined $350,000 in the first 2 months of the season for not playing guys. Are the Jazz going to do that? Because the Jazz got fined last year for doing it. That's going to be interesting to see.
All right, my friend. Great to see you. Have a great weekend. We'll get you back in next week.
Hi, Spence.
All right, the great Richard Smith. All right, who likes money? Raise your hand. You're all raising your hand. If you're not, you're lying. Let's get your money working for you. Let's help your money do more for you. And the secret is, like, if you're with a big national branch, a big national bank, you're with them so they can profit off of you. Even some of the local banks aren't in business to help you. They're in business to make money. That's how it works. Now, the deal is, with a credit union, it's the opposite approach. It's not for profit. They're in existence to help your money help you make your money work for you, compound interest, grow some retirement, and help your children understand how money works as well. Our friends at America First Credit Union have a great new member offer going on right now, where if you open up a checkings and a savings account, they're just giving you $100. They're hooking you up with $100. If you open up an account for a teen, they're going to give the teen $50. It is the official credit union of the University of Utah Athletic Department, Real Salt Lake, and the Utah Jazz. You get early entrance to all the venues and a bunch of discounts on merch and a bunch of discounts on concessions. Go to americafirst.com/deals or stop by one of their 87 branches here locally, our friends at America First Credit Union. We got a little handy, a little sports score coming up next on ESPN 700. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday, usually about right now, but I've misbehaved with the clock, so we have kept my friend Preston Handy waiting for way too long. Preston, happy Thursday, buddy. How we doing?
Hey, Spence, what's up?
Appreciate the time today. So let's get into our first story. It is a story, as my computer refreshes, it's a Nike story. Trademark litigation looks like it's going the way of Nike. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we've talked about legal issues in the world of intellectual property, real exciting stuff. Nike, who I think a lot of people would recognize as one of the most prominent, recognizable logos and brands for the last 40 years, probably. Well, they're into a dispute with the company, and got to unpack this a little bit, follow this along. Nike has a soccer shoe that's been on the market for about 25 years. They claim it the soccer shoe of a youth generation, and it's called Total 90. Now, the important part is total space between 90. Well, there's a company out there, an apparel and soccer company, named Total 90, but no space between the 90. So very similar, right? Well, this company, they sued Nike for trademark infringement, and surprisingly, Nike had a trademark for Total 90, the soccer shoe, but it ran out in 2019, and they said, well, we've been using this, let it run out. This shoe's been on the market for so long. Well, what happens in these trademark cases, Total 90, Total No Space 90, has sued Nike for trademark infringement, claiming that there is now confusion in the marketplace, that people will confuse the two products. And as often is the case, they are seeking a temporary restraining order in suing them. This isn't the final part of it, but they're saying, hey, you need to be restrained or stopped from using the Total 90 and selling the Total 90 soccer shoe. Well, apparently they had gone to Nike sometime before they sued and tried to strike a deal with them, saying, hey, we will let you use this trademark. And this is kind of similar to what, remember the ongoing lawsuit of the Utah Mammoth with the Mammoth bag, whatever, Mammoth hockey bags. Well, they went to him, tried to strike a deal, and Nike didn't want to do it. So now it's gone down the path with the judge, and the judge came back and they agreed with Nike, and the reasoning was they said that they're not going to grant the restraining order because they didn't think that the same or similar retail outlets that sell the products would be overwhelmed by this. And they also went on to say that that there was lack of evidence of any actual confusion that consumers would believe Total 90's products are related to Total 90. So figure that one out. Maybe in this case, the litigation will continue. Nike just isn't restrained from selling their product and using Total 90 right now, but maybe it does pay to be the 800-pound gorilla in the litigation. I'm
sure it does. You would know better than I would with that. We have another copyright story. I believe Mac Jones, the quarterback for the Niners, the copyright is win passage, but he did not infringe upon this. I'm learning this in real time. Preston, what's going on?
Yeah, exciting stuff. So this is another IP dispute, and we've talked about this guy before, interesting guy, Keith Bell, who claims to be the father of swimming psychology. And we talked about a dispute with him before. He's written some motivational stuff in the Win book, and he claims that as part of it, there's the Win passage. Well, remember Lane Kiffin, who's in the news for other reasons, some time ago he put forth some motivational statements and that type of thing to his team, and Keith Bell sued him saying, hey, you're infringing on my trademark. Well, now he's suing Mac Jones, and as we know, former Alabama quarterback, played for the Patriots and now for the Niners. In 2017, I believe, or 2019, when Mac Jones was a 17-year-old, he tweeted out some quotes from Win Passage, and he sent them out as just motivational type things. Well, Keith Bell comes in and he's, in 2020, caught wind of this 3 or 4 year old tweet, and he's suing Mac Jones again, saying this is a trademark infringement, and he even alleges that he wants $250,000, alleging that Mac Jones, using this as a 17-year-old, upped his marketability and whatever he arrived at. And the court came back and said, no, we don't agree with you, Keith. Number one, we said we don't think this tweet of Win Passage constituted it constituted fair use and was not infringement. And they even went on to say, the judge in the Kiffin thing said, hey, you've got a pretty high impression of yourself, thinking that you're the only one that puts out these type of things, and that you've got trademark to them and people are using them. And they said Mac Jones was not using it to make any money. He didn't make any money from it. And so they even cautioned him. The court said, this type of thing, if he's filed several lawsuits, he said this type of thing could be seen as harassing or for another improper purpose, or for, in other words, shaking down people for money. But he's lost again.
Moving over to the world of the AAF, the Alliance of American Football League, which I believe existed here. I have not even heard of this league in a number of years. But Tom Dundon, who has plenty of money, is out $1 from what I understand here. Preston, what's going on?
$1. So we've talked about Tom Dundon in another story, and he's notable because he is the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, and he also looks like he's going to be potentially the owner of the Portland Trailblazers. Well, back in 2019 or somewhere, he bought the already kind of failing Alliance of American Football League, and it was short-lived and collapsed in 2019, and a lot of financial problems, and as often is the case, they went in and filed bankruptcy. Well, when you have bankruptcy, you have a lot of people sitting there with their hand out, creditors saying, hey, wait a minute, we're holding the bag, you're filing bankruptcy, we want to be paid. Well, the trustee of the bankruptcy court looked at this and said, at Tom Dundon, and said, no, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And so the trustee sued Tom Dundon and his companies and whatever, and basically alleged that, hey, you bought this company and you made some promises, you made some representations that you were going to pump, what it said, $250 million into it to get this thing off the ground and keep it going, and as a result, pay the creditors, people get going all of a sudden, and you didn't do that, and kind of alleged that what you did some self-dealing. You kind of came in here and were using some of your own marketing companies, doing certain things that really didn't, he said that they engaged in inequitable conduct by granting free advertising to Dundon-owned, controlled, and preferred entities. Well, the court agreed in part with the trustee, and he was found liable for breaching fiduciary duty of loyalty. He also they explained that he was engaged in self-dealing that benefited his friends and used assets from the league. But they said he didn't show everything, and he was, even was criticized for being on opposite sides of the various transactions, but didn't meet the burden that you need to in this type of case, and he was found liable essentially, but he was only liable for $1. I don't totally understand that. It said the reasoning was the trustee was not able to prove any causally related harm, meaning that the harm that in the bankruptcy was not related to these things that he actually did, these self-dealing things. So he lost, but I think he won, and I think $1, I think billionaire's it's not going to hurt him too much.
Not sure if you're aware, Preston, but college football coaches have been in the news as of late, if you've been paying attention a little bit. So our final story will kind of involve two different stories. It's Brian Kelly, who's owed $54 million, Lane Kiffin, who's now the new coach of LSU, and ultimately this feels like it's a little bit out of control. In this piece by our guy Michael McCann, how colleges can kind of solve this. Any solution here?
Well, yeah, when I saw the headline from Michael McCann, I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be, we're going to get some really meaty stuff, and I'll get to that in a minute. But as you know, we've spoken about Brian Kelly, and he was let go by LSU, and they kind of came in, and he came in, and he got a lawyer and said, you owe me $54 million of the buyout, which is an important part of this. It was a buyout. And LSU said, no, you know what, we hadn't fired you, and by the way, we fired you for cause. So we spoke about this a few weeks ago, and we thought it was a bad look for LSU. Well, they came around, and they finally looked at this and thought, yeah, we're probably in trouble here. So they agreed to pay him his $54 million buyout, and they sent him a letter that set forth all of these terms, kind of saying, yeah, you have a contract that has all these terms and a $54 million buyout, but there are many other terms to this contract, which include you trying to find a job, keeping us posted, giving us updates on interviews you have and what you're looking at and all this. But then Lane Kiffin comes in, and here he leaves Ole Miss, and he gets a big contract with the same LSU. And What does he get? He gets a really huge buyout in the event that they want to part ways with him. So the question is that Michael McCann poses is, can we do anything about this legally? And so, as we know, in the world of the NIL, the athletes, and everyone, a big part of this has been the arguments of antitrust. And, starting with Ed O'Bannon, when he was shown on the one of the video games, his pitcher, he brought a lawsuit about that. And then the Alston case came in, and that resulted in going to the United States Supreme Court. And they ruled in favor of what we now call NIL, that players can profit from their name, image, and likeness. And who knows what that is anymore. But so the law that's used all the way is antitrust law. And antitrust law prevents anti-competition, and that goes into the world of coaching, because conferences and universities, they're all fighting for good coaches, and they're, as a result of them doing this, what are they doing? They're offering them big contracts, and they're competing. Essentially, they are competing for the services of these coaches. And in the Alston case in front of the Supreme Court, they pointed out a lot. They said, hey, wait a minute. Coaches are able to get these big salaries. They're able to leave whenever they want to the highest bidder. Yet the players, they're not able to profit from it. So it put the coaches in the crosshairs of what's going on. So Michael McCann poses the question, is there anything we can do about that? And he says, he goes through a bunch of analysis to not run afoul of antitrust law, where you're trying to get, and what he poses is, hey, universities don't have to agree to these terms, these big contracts, these big buyouts, which kind of sounds crazy because one university will always do it, and if the others say no, they're going to look bad and they're not going to get their coach. So he, and you can't, I don't think he has a solution really, and you can't have all the schools doing what's called conspire. Everyone kind of get behind the in the boardrooms and say, hey, we need to all stop this so it doesn't hurt all of us by coaches leaving and us having to play these big buyouts. So long and short of it, Spence, I thought there was going to be a really good legal answer to this, but it's probably not. Everyone is fighting for this, and no one's going to come in and agree and try and get a system that is predictable and and has some safeguards on it, and that's just the way it is.
All right, Preston, appreciate the time today, even though you're rolling solo. So for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, Spence, I love coming on here and talking about these legal issues in the world of sports. We'd love to hear from anyone out there and serve as a legal resource, but especially if you have a personal injury case. That's what we specialize in. Give us a call at 801-264-6677. You'll talk to either me or Garrett, or you can visit our website at handylawutah.com and learn all about us there and submit your questions.
All right, thank you, sir. Have an excellent weekend, and, of course, as always, go Utes.
Go Utes. Thanks, Spence.
All
Have a
right.
good weekend.
There he is, Preston from the law firm of Handy and Handy. For any legal questions, give them a call. Really good people that can help you out if you find yourself in a tough spot. We've got 3 hours in the books today. We still have 1 hour to go. We're going to send you over to Thursday Night Football between Porter's Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions. It's a big one at Ford Field. So final hour of the program comes your way next on ESPN 700. All right, Drive at 5 time, Thursday afternoon style. It's been a rather sunny yet chilly day today. The sun has been shining, but it has been cold. We're looking at about 30, 35 degrees outside. On this Thursday afternoon, looks like we are going to have some rain and potentially some snow this weekend, but happy Thursday to you, as it is every day. It's great to have you guys with us. We're going to have Utah women's basketball on the station tonight. When we say goodnight, it's 6. Well, about 6:15. We're going to go a little later than normal and then send you over to some Utah women's hoops. They're taking on Colorado State tonight. The Jazz are in action in about 23 minutes from now. They're going to take on the Brooklyn Nets. A little East Coast style trip for the Jazz, just a kind of a 1-2 New York stop. It's Brooklyn tonight. Then it's going to be the Knicks tomorrow. They're back at home for kind of a one-game situation before they hit the road. Of course, it is a busy weekend ahead. In the world of college football, conference championship weekend lies ahead. BYU and Texas Tech will kick off at 10 a.m. bright and early on Saturday morning down at AT&T Stadium, Jerry's World in Arlington, Texas. Texas Tech a 12.5-point favorite, 12.5-point favorite for our listener that complains when I say that. But the conference championship weekend actually gets rolling starting tomorrow with Troy James Madison at 5 o'clock on ESPN. Then it's North Texas and Tulane. Chatted with our guy Sam Bruckhouse earlier. Tulane alum, played football at the school. So a big situation for a school that, historically speaking, does not have a lot of football success. And it's of note tomorrow because depending on what happens with the ACC, we could see both James Madison and Tulane, or maybe North Texas if they get the upset down in New Orleans, join the 12-team field. If Duke is able to upset Virginia, which is the ACC championship, it does sound more like a lacrosse national championship than a football national championship or a conference championship, but that's what it is. Duke, Virginia, of course, Miami is still there on the outside looking in. Could they bump up a little bit? We'll have to wait and see. For BYU, it seems to be rather elementary and very simplistic. Win and you're in, and lose and you are not. That is not my opinion of what should happen. I think when you stack BYU's resume up next to Notre Dame mainly, that's kind of the main topic of conversation. And, of course, a lot of the conversation is involving the importance or lack thereof of playing in your conference championship game. Now, Notre Dame, I do think, is actually in danger of falling out, but I don't think it's going to be as a result of BYU jumping them. I mean, Notre Dame, of course, famously independent. They will not be playing in a conference championship game this weekend. And at this point, they're ranked in the top 10. And for BYU, if you don't win, you have to find a way to move up into the top 10. And I just don't really see that happening. One very loose scenario, and it's kind of interesting to consider because Kirby Smart is 1-5 in his last 6 games against Alabama. And the Georgia-Alabama game is for the SEC championship, of course. That will be on ABC. It is in Atlanta. If Georgia somehow, some way just stomps Bama by like 30 or more, which I don't see happening, and BYU Texas Tech like go to overtime or Tech has to kick a field goal to win at the end, maybe that's enough for the committee to consider BYU jumping Alabama. But I do not see the committee basically ranking Notre Dame lower as a result of them being idle. They actually already fell a spot last week to 10. And, of course, the Miami-Notre Dame conversation and conundrum continues to permeate its way through college football. Miami does not have an opportunity to prove that they should move up, but they did beat Notre Dame head-to-head. And as I've screamed about all year, if we are not valuing head-to-head, if we're not valuing the games that are actually played, then you might as well just let ChatGPT decide who the 12 best teams in the country are. It has to be decided on the field. There's a conversation about doing away with conference championship games altogether, or, as Kalani kind of referenced earlier this week, the teams that are in the mix for the CFP but are not playing in the conference championship games this weekend, is there a way to match some of those teams up head-to-head? There was a report that certain teams have kicked the tires here, like Vanderbilt apparently would like an opportunity one more time to show the committee they belong. They're at 14, just right ahead of Utah. I mean, if we play this hypothetical thing and have a little fun with it, how cool would it be this week if Utah and Vandy were playing on a neutral field with one more opportunity to show the committee exactly who they are and who they are right now? Because the committee has basically showed us that they value that as much as anything, not necessarily who you have been in the past, but who are you right now? How healthy are you? How available are your best players? Part of the criteria is how available your coaches are, but, this is another example of the committee talking out of both sides of their mouth because they moved Ole Miss up a spot. Now, that was as a result of Texas A&M losing for the first time all year. They moved, they moved down 4 spots entirely. When BYU lost to Tech, they moved down 5 spots. A&M losing to Texas, they moved down 4 spots. But I'm sure Texas would like an opportunity, one more, even though they have 3 losses. And all due respect to Steve Sarkisian, it is not an insult if you guys are not included. You're a 3-loss team. I mean, you're going to move up, ahead of one of the 1-loss teams or even the 2-loss teams, Oklahoma and Alabama. But Texas A&M falls. Texas Tech right now at 4, and they could potentially move up depending on what happens in the Big Ten championship game. The last time we had a conference championship game featuring 2 undefeated teams, a 1 and 2. I think it was the Tim Tebow Urban Meyer Florida team against Nick Saban in Alabama back in like 2008, 2009. So a little history in the Big Ten, and maybe that's a lopsided game. I don't think Ohio State is in danger of moving down that much. The committee has basically said, even though Indiana's resume, you can make an argument that Indiana's resume is more impressive than Ohio State's, the committee just thinks Ohio State's the best team in the country, and it's hard to argue with that. So if Ohio State smacks Indiana and Georgia and Alabama play a competitive game, how high could Tech move up if they smoke BYU? Is an interesting thing to consider. And it also gives BYU fans a little bit more fodder and a little bit more frustration. Like if you're 2 losses on the season, if we kind of play this exercise, and of course it is contingent upon these results this weekend, and nobody knows how it's going to go down, which is why we play the games, which is why the game should be heavily weighted. It's hilarious that I even have to say that out loud, but the committee just continues to kind of approach this with a lot of ambiguity and leaves a lot of teams guessing. So depending on the results this weekend, I don't think Tech can rise past 3, maybe 2. But if you're BYU, you're saying to yourself, well, wait a second. We have 2 losses all year. If you're telling us that Texas Tech is, let's get weird and say, the 3rd best team in the country, and we have 2 losses and it's to them, and one's on a neutral field and the other's on the road, then how in the world are we not ranked higher of a Notre Dame team that ultimately has played really well as of late? They lost 2 games earlier in the season, but 2 good losses. The committee is valuing, like, quote, good losses at Miami and then home to Texas A&M. And then since then, they've run off 10 straight games. 2 top 25 wins, at least at the time. It was USC and Pitt. Pitt is no longer in the top 25. BYU has 2 top 25 wins. Notre Dame's best win on the season is USC. BYU's best win on the season is Utah. Utah's the number 15 team in the country. And with the way Arizona finished off the year, they're the number 18 team in the country. So BYU boasts 2 top 18 wins, and Notre Dame simply does not. When you look at Notre Dame's FPI, they're the 3rd-ranked team in the country, which is a lot higher than BYU at 15. But BYU's strength of schedule, 35. Notre Dame's strength of schedule, 42. BYU's strength of record is 6. Notre Dame's strength of record is 13. Things like game control go the way of Notre Dame. BYU 2-1 against teams currently in the top 25. Notre Dame 1-2, as I referenced their best win, USC. And ultimately, BYU's best win is Utah at 13. So when it comes to how this will shake out, the committee's telling us, I don't see an avenue for BYU to get in as an at-large. I think they're simply going to have to go down to Arlington and, quite frankly, shock the world. I have heard nobody, and by nobody I mean like the guys that work for BYU that pretend they're media members, like they're picking BYU. Like BYU shills are picking BYU. But like non-biased observers of this game, I've heard 0 people pick BYU to win this game, okay? The people that are picking BYU to win have something to gain by making that pick. Everybody is siding with Tech. Tech's a 12.5-point favorite, 12.5-point favorite. BYU has to run the football in order to win this game, and therein lies the problem. Now, Bears had some really, really good games this year and moments where he's shown the ability to throw the football at a high level. But when it comes to selling out and stopping the run and making a true freshman beat you in a Big 12 championship game, I would anticipate that that's what Tech is going to do, because Texas Tech has the best run defense, not just in the Big 12, but in the country. So if you're BYU, and by the way, L.J. Martin named Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year today. Spencer Fano, Utah's own Spencer Fano, named Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year. Devin Dampier named Big 12 Newcomer of the Year. But BYU's offensive line, I think, has been better than most people thought, but nobody's been able to run the football on Tech. And if you're BYU, if you're Aaron Roderick, you got to get creative here, because if you're going to be stubborn about running the football, you're simply playing the wrong team. And that's why I have a hard time seeing BYU get this win. Now, when you look at the first iteration of the game that these two teams played earlier this season, I can understand that if you're a BYU fan, or if you work for BYU and pretend like you're in the media, you could actually, kind of create a narrative that game could have been closer. I believe it was JoJo Phillips' first game back. He had at least one massive drop, if not more than that. When you look at, and by the way, I think Chase Roberts is going to play. I'm not sure. L.J. Martin was certainly not healthy. He only had 10 carries for 35 yards. L.J.'s had 75 carries over the past 3 games. He is going to have to get going. Chase had a couple drops as well. Parker Kingston put it on the deck. Barrett Bachmeier lost a fumble. So there were certainly things where if you're BYU, you point to, okay, we just can't turn the ball over. LJ's healthy at this point. Maybe Bear has grown a little bit. And if we can get a couple of bounces our way, if Tech is the team that turns it over a couple of times, maybe we can make it a little bit closer. But if we're really honest about how that game went, it was 29-7, and it could have been like 55-7. Because Texas Tech could not convert. Now, BYU deserves a lot of credit for their red zone defense, and ironically enough, Texas Tech, if they have an Achilles heel, it is the fact that red zone offense hasn't been great. And Baron Morton is just fine. He's not awesome. He's not one of the highest-ranked Big 12 quarterbacks when it comes to most any metric. The only loss of the season that Tech has is actually without him. Okay, so it was Arizona State when Baron Morton was hurt, but of course Utah fans know the deal as far as what Tech looks like when Baron Morton isn't playing. It was the backup that rolled into town and beat Utah. Baron Morton is in the middle of the Big 12 in most any metric. He's 6th in QBR. When it comes to his ability to throw the football, at this point, he is 7th in the conference. He's right next to Devin. So that's not a scenario where if you're BYU, you should fear their quarterback. It is the problematic nature of BYU having to run the football, and then ultimately Texas Tech just being the best in the country and not allowing you to do that. All right, we'll get Roxy Bernstein's take on this. We'll talk a little Coach Witt. Tomorrow is the deadline for Kyle to inform the administration as to whether or not he's coming back. Obviously, the big news this week has been Kalani Sitake flirting with Penn State and then getting back together with BYU. Conference championship game ahead. What bowl game will Utah play in? Signing day yesterday, so we'll bounce around a little bit with It looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown is playing tonight. Amon-Ra St. Brown did not practice this week due to an ankle sprain. He suffered on Thanksgiving against the Packers. So that is a surprise. Update your fantasy football lineup. That's the most important thing. I believe it's fantasy football playoffs this week for most of you. So Cowboys-Lions tonight. The Lions are a 3.5-point favorite, 3.5-point favorite at home against the Cowboys, who are hanging in there. But that's a big piece of news that I believe is unexpected, that Amon-Ra St. Brown is actually going to go after not practicing all week long. So there you go. We will have Utah women's basketball tonight. Utah women's hoops taking on Colorado State. So a little bit of pregame coverage will come your way, and then tip-off will be at 6:30. The Jazz are in action right now against Brooklyn. They're going to take on the Knicks coming up, and then they'll be home for just one game before going out on the road. The Utah Mammoth, after smoking Anaheim last night 7-0, will be back in action against Vancouver. It's been a up-and-down year for the Mammoth, but maybe they found a little something last night. Porter National Signing Day yesterday, and we started the show off with what I perceive to be a very positive 24 to 48 hours with Utah football, namely Celeste Moa, Ben's son, Ben Moa, Utah football legend, flipped his commitment from Tennessee to Utah. I will remind you that if you missed the interview that Sean did with Ben earlier, Ben Moa was on the Sean O'Connell show today. It was excellent, really good insight. The Twins. We're waiting on the Twins. What's the deal with the Twins? We need to know the deal with the Twins.
The Pula boys. As you remember, SportsCenter zeroed in on the fellas after the state title game. Yeah, I mean, listen, from what I understand, they're putting it off because they don't know yet. And it's come to a situation where if you're not ready to sign on signing day, maybe that has to do with cold feet coming into the situation. Maybe it has to do with a flip late in the scenario. Hey, maybe it happens to do with a personal connection with one Kalani Sitake. I don't know.
Huh. Interesting.
But hey,
say more.
I listen. I think that this is one that'll probably stay in Utah. But I do believe that these are our two kids that are going to be playing at least, whether it's one here, one there, BYU or Utah, both of them at one or the other. I think these are two kids that are going to stay home, and they're too good to go anywhere besides BYU and Utah in the state. So at least it narrows it down.
Yeah, you want to keep these kids in our backyard. Once upon a time, I don't know the exact number, but I believe when I graduated high school, there were like 8 or 9 D1 football players in the whole state. Now it seems like most years they're like 40 to 50 D1 football players coming out of Utah. It's pretty wild.
The number one is just the numbers, right? We have a growing population and continue to every year and year. There's just more people here than there used to be 20 years ago, but there's also more exposure on the football we play here, right? And that's a thanks to Kyle Whittingham, to Lavelle, to Ron McBride, and all these guys that have kind of zeroed in on not only the talent you bring out of here, but the talent you develop here. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Utah, when you leave SEC country, is number one when it comes to per capita producing NFL players, and I think they're number 2 producing Division I college players. So there's a lot of talent when it comes to this state, and it's seeming like now in this NIL space, staying home where you have like a brand already, where you have a little bit of a local celebrity, is something that you got to use if you're a Utah, if you're a BYU, if you're a Colorado. Dion has not gotten a single one of the top 16 players in Colorado. So if you want to look at what's going right here and what's going wrong there, look no further than those numbers.
That's interesting. So both Jaron Pula and Keenan Pula at this point undecided. They're both wide receivers.
Yeah.
Athletes.
Yeah.
But
in high school,
but
they're wide
this?
receivers.
How about keeping one of the wide receivers at, wide receiver? Because it would be nice if we had a playmaker on the outside.
Yeah, Utah needs to. That's the exciting thing about Moa. But, dude, I think he could be like a scary next-level defensive back, safety, center fielder type. So we'll see. But a lot of athletes that can be used in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, the 2 stars of this class, Kelvin Obot, who is a big boy from Idaho, offensive lineman, and then Celesi Moa, Ben's boy, who flipped from Tennessee to Utah. So a lot of the headlines over the past couple of years, and a lot of this is because all of these bros want attention. Speaking of which, Cookie Bro is at it again.
Oh, no.
The human cookie has pretended that he's heard some sort of call, and this time he is tweeting out Jason McGowan, who answers the question, what would a human look like if it was an actual sugar cookie? The CEO of Crumble. He says, time to go on the offense with the playoff committee. I've got an idea.
Okay.
What the hell is this bro going to do about the playoff committee? It's one thing to donate some money to keep Kalani after getting off the sidelines.
Show up at someone's door, I guess. I'm not sure.
This guy.
Send a bunch of Crumble to the committee's headquarters.
Just the thirst trap. Like, I talked about this earlier. I mean, clearly, Utah has some boosters and donors behind the scenes that don't have the thirst trap disease that these BYU bros have. Every time they donate, they want to tweet. The best thing about this cookie bro is that his pinned tweet is him walking into the locker room, which I'm sure is a place he's never been before. And he's like, hey, I've offered to pay the fine for rushing the field. The Big 12 is like, yeah, we're not fining you.
We didn't fine you.
It's his pinned tweet. It's like he just wants the attention. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's attention, but it's also, hey, when you're the CEO of a cookie company, like it's how many cookies got sold this week? How many? I saw people sending Crumble cookie to like Penn State people, like just part of it. And like that's his brand. That's part of how he makes money too, which is, again, a big part of this.
Well, shout out to the Utah football donors who don't need the thirst trap and the attention. I will admit to nearly being scooped a number of different times because now the Penn State coaching search is getting to the point where it's as pathetic as people faking announcements of like high school coaches from movies or series.
Blue Mountain State.
Yeah, I've almost.
You saw Coach Daniels?
I did, but I almost went with it because I never watched that movie.
Who is this guy in the visor? It kind of looks like Lane Kiffin.
It does a little bit, but ultimately they're still looking for a head coach. The final bowl projections, we're going to find out where Utah is going to go bowling in 3 days. But it looks like it's going to be the Vegas Bowl. It looks like it's going to be Iowa. It might be Illinois. So we'll find out more about that over the course of the next few days. All right, tomorrow is the deadline for Coach Witt to inform the administration of what his plans are.
Allegedly.
The question is, when will we find out about it?
Either December 31st of this year or December 31st of next year.
Do you have a lean?
It's funny because it's gone back and forth. And listen, I'm a guy who's in those rooms with Kyle. I'm sitting there with Sly as Kyle's doing his post-game interview. I usually share a conversation with Kyle afterwards. And he's someone who is like not trying to be secretive, but is also someone who keeps things very close to the vest. And there are times at this season where I have kind of felt like this might be it. And I have felt like there have been things around him and around the program that, maybe lead me to believe this is it. But then I see this recruiting class. We are still without any word. It's after signing day. And I look at it as reality. The guy's still a really damn good football coach. The only reason I think there's really much pressure for him to, or even tension for him to make a move, Spence, is only because we've said it, right? And Morgan is now the head coach in waiting. If none of that were a reality, I don't know that there would be this kind of pressure outside of the tough year last year with injuries, right? So that's the interesting part to me, is that he's clearly still a guy that has some juice and is coaching at a high level. The lean is like right there. I could go either way right now. So I guess that doesn't answer your question.
Well, again, as I've been saying all week, it feels like this is it. I really wonder where Morgan is on this. Mm-hmm. Now, he is always going to say the right thing. And I'm not even saying when he says the right thing, he doesn't mean it. At some point, you just got to be like, dude, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And they obviously are super close. And Morgan's been on the show multiple times this year. He's been on with Sean quite a bit because they have the coordinator's corner. And he simply just says, because Sean a couple of times, it's been pretty funny. He's tried to sneak in a whole when you're the head coach type thing. And Morgan simply says, well, I'm not. I'm the defensive coordinator, and he's the head coach. Yeah,
it's funny. And I really do think it's the only reason there's a little bit of tension in this dynamic. Otherwise, the tension would just be about Morgan maybe taking another job. It wouldn't be about him necessarily taking over this very moment. But interesting stuff.
Well, Billy Napier is going to James Madison. That is who is going to coach Penn State?
Matt Campbell, I think.
Matt Campbell would not be a bad option, actually.
I think we come here Monday, we'll probably be talking about that. But
at this point in the game, and honestly, even earlier, he would not have been a bad option. Matt Campbell's done a good job at Iowa State. Iowa State was this year's Utah from last year. They just could not stay healthy. So we'll see. All right, Porter, let's get out of here. What comes our way? Weekend edition, Friday show. What do we got?
Friday edition of The Drive. We'll be back. Dave McMenamin talking some NBA Daily Assist. Elliot Fall, of course, on the World Cup draw day, and then we'll go from there. A bunch of college football on the way out.
That's right. The World Cup draw is tomorrow, so we're going to cover the World Cup on the show because it is, the biggest sporting event in the globe. Special thank you today, Roxy Bernstein, Sam Bruckhouse, and Richard Smith. For any of the sound you may miss from the show today, ESPN700sports.com is where you go. You can also download our mobile app and take us on the go. That ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then for what we do in our space, 4 hours every afternoon. If you missed any of it, go to the podcast page, become a supporter, follow, subscribe, rate, review. We all ask you to do it because if you actually like what we do, that's how you can help us because this is what you pay for it, which is free. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying it out. Utah women's basketball coming up on the other side right here on your home of the Utes, ESPN 700.